Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. The latest on the attack in Boulder, Colorado. Authorities say the suspect had planned the attack for more than a year. They've charged him with a hate crime. South Korea set for new leadership. Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung is projected to win the snap presidential election after President Yoon's ousting. The Trump administration is fighting another legal battle over tariffs, and trade tensions with China rise over critical mineral exports. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon testifies before a Senate panel on the department's 2026 budget request. We'll tune into that hearing.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Tuesday, June 3rd. I'm Chris Beers. South Korea will soon have a new leader. Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung is forecast to win the country's snap presidential election. A joint exit poll showed Lee with nearly 52% compared to conservative candidate Kim Moon-soo's roughly 39%. The election comes 2 months after conservative President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office over his short-lived martial law declaration. Pre-election surveys also suggested Lee appeared headed for an easy win. Kim has struggled to win over moderate swing voters. His People Power Party is still feuding over how to view Yoon's actions. The past 6 months saw large crowds of people rallying in the streets to either denounce or support Yoon. The winning candidate will immediately be sworn in as president on Wednesday for a 5-year term without the usual 2-month transition period. Turning now to political uncertainty in the Netherlands. Dutch conservative leader Geert Wilders has pulled his party from the country's governing coalition. This means the effective collapse of Netherlands' right-wing government and triggers the possibility of snap elections. Wilders says his decision came after the coalition refused to back his strict asylum policies, including closing borders to asylum seekers and sending refugees back to their home countries. His departure leaves the Netherlands with a fragile minority government amid growing political uncertainty just weeks before world leaders gather for a NATO summit in the country. Wilders' party won a strong showing in the 2023 elections, but has faced criticism for anti-immigration rhetoric and failed to gain full support for its hardline agenda. Opposition leaders say new elections are inevitable. Authorities charged the Colorado firebombing suspect with a hate crime. 12 victims have been identified in the attack on a rally for Israeli hostages in Boulder. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A horrific incident as a perpetrator threw handmade bombs toward crowds of protesters on Sunday in Boulder, Colorado. The crowds were advocating for the return of hostages held by Hamas terrorists.
Mr. Solomon stated that he had been planning this attack for a year. And he acted because he hated what he called the Zionist group. And when he was interviewed about the attack, he said he wanted them all to die. He had no regrets, and he would go back and do it again.
A Homeland Security spokeswoman said the Colorado terrorist attack suspect, Mohammed Solomon, is legally in our country. She said he entered the country in August 2022 on a tourist visa that expired in February 2023.
It's acts of terrorism in our country, and that's what this case in Boulder, Colorado is being investigated as. Kudos to our FBI director, Kash Patel, for immediately calling this a targeted terrorist attack. That's clearly what it was. And we know that this individual, this terrorist, was allowed into this country by the previous administration, was foolishly given a tourism visa, and then was illegally allowed to stay. These individuals are going to be deported, and we're not going to tolerate such violence in our country.
The suspect, 45 years old, allegedly shouted "Free Palestine" as he threw the firebombs.
There were 16 unused Molotov cocktails that were recovered by law enforcement in the hours after the incident took place. 16. So I really want to thank the Boulder Police Department. There were 16 counts of attempted murder in the first degree. He's also charged with 2 counts of use of an incendiary device. He's also charged with 16 other counts of attempted use of an incendiary device.
According to court document, the suspect is being charged with a federal hate crime. President Trump said on Truth Social that acts of terrorism will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This is yet another example of why we must keep our borders secure and deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland. In a post on X, the police said that none of the victims in the attack has died. The suspect appeared in court on Monday evening for his first brief proceeding. His next appearance is set for Thursday when charges would be filed. David Lamb, NTD News.
The Trump administration has asked for a pause on a second court ruling challenging tariffs that were invoked under emergency powers. The administration asked a U.S. appeals court to put a hold on a judge's order from last week in a case involving two American toy makers. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and an update on U.S.-China trade relations.
The Monday filing argued that halting the tariffs would harm trade talks with other nations and make the tariff seem like less of a serious threat. Last Thursday, U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras ruled that two American family-owned toy companies, Learning Resources and Hand to Mind, would be irreparably harmed by President Trump's tariffs. The judge also said the law Trump used to put most of the tariffs in place, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, doesn't actually include anything about allowing tariffs. In another case, a specialized trade court ruled last week that Trump went too far when he used emergency powers to impose broad tariffs. A federal appeals court put that decision on hold, temporarily giving Trump back the power to use those tariffs under the law. Tensions between the U.S. and China are heating up again. President Trump says China totally violated a 90-day trade deal made last month, mainly over Beijing's export controls on critical minerals, materials key to the auto and defense industries. China pushed back, accusing the U.S. of breaking the deal instead. White House officials say Trump and Chinese Communist leader Xi could speak this week. China corners the market on critical minerals processing, and the controls mean that rare earth magnets needed for critical automotive components could slow or stop. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Falkender reacted to the export issues on CNBC's Squawk Box.
They are slow walking the exporting of the critical minerals of magnets in particular that are supposed to be unlocked by that agreement. And so unfortunately, we are getting back to exactly the non-tariff barriers that we have been working with China on for years.
Falkender says accusations by the Chinese regime that the U.S. has violated the terms of the Geneva Trade Agreement due to semiconductor exports are not grounded in reality.
We have long had issues with exporting semiconductors that would go into artificial intelligence. That has never been part of that was not part of the trade negotiations in Geneva.
Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration wants countries to give them their best offer on trade negotiations by Wednesday. It says a draft letter from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative suggests an urgency within the administration to complete deals before the July 9th 90-day time frame established in April. Officials have said that several agreements are nearing completion. Washington has been engaged in such talks with the European Union, Japan, Vietnam, and India, among others. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Trump administration's border czar Tom Homan has weighed in on the Boulder incident. On Fox News yesterday, Homan blamed the Biden administration for creating a national security vulnerability at the southern border.
What concerned me the most was they created the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. Not only did 2 million known gotaways, 2 million people cross the border, we don't know who they are, where they came from, we don't know where they are now. We are going to be dealing with this for the next 10 years. Because of the chaos they created in 4 years.
And while immigration officers take action, Homan says they're facing backlash from protesters and members of Congress. He warns the consequences won't just be political, but potentially deadly. Next, at a press conference yesterday, ICE and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts reported the largest number of arrests so far in their illegal immigration enforcement efforts. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
ICE officials joined the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts on Monday to announce what they call the largest number of arrests so far. An ICE official talks about the results of a month-long enhanced targeting operation.
These brave men and women have worked tirelessly to arrest approximately 1,500 criminal aliens and illegal aliens during Operation Patriot. In the beginning of May, ICE and its federal and state partners launched the whole-of-government effort to remove dangerous criminal aliens from all over the Commonwealth.
Acting Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement Todd Lyons said hundreds of agents and officers risk their lives every day to remove dangerous criminals. But he said they need cooperation from local cities.
If sanctuary cities would change their policies and turn these violent criminal aliens over to us, into our custody, instead of releasing them into the public, we would not have to go out to the communities and do this.
Massachusetts U.S. Attorney Leah Foley said the department is committed to protecting their communities and prioritizing the well-being of their public.
Since January 20th, our office has charged well over 50 foreign nationals who unlawfully re-entered our country after being deported. This includes 15 individuals charged in the last month alone. These individuals violated our immigration laws when they entered the United States unlawfully.
Out of the approximately 1,500 arrests, 790 of them had criminal convictions, and 277 had final orders of removal or deportation. Foley said her office will not tolerate anyone who obstructs ICE operations.
What I have seen on the news and in social media is concerning, to say the least. Agents' safety is paramount, and it is a felony to threaten or assault a federal agent. I want to be clear about that. No one is above the law.
Lyons reported that a significant number of the criminal aliens were drug traffickers, sex offenders, murderers, and foreign fugitives. In an interview with Fox News on Monday morning, he said there are ongoing efforts to identify all of the individuals who have overstayed their visas, saying millions have come in. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A major push is underway to ramp up oil and gas production in Alaska. Trump administration officials are in the state this week outlining a plan they say will restore American energy independence. Here's more on that story.
President Trump is turning his focus to Alaska's vast reserves of oil and gas, the goal to double the flow of oil through the state's vast pipeline system and build a massive natural gas project to match. Energy Secretary Chris Wright made the announcement at Prudhoe Bay, a cold and windswept hub of oil activity near the Arctic Ocean, joined by Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Wright stood before a group of pipeline workers and officials, calling for what he described as freeing Alaska from limits on development.
The oil is here. The discoveries are here. If we free Alaska and the people here, we're going to more than double the oil flow through the pipeline and build the big, beautiful twin, the natural gas pipeline from the North Slope.
The visit underscores Trump's broader energy agenda to roll back regulations and revive long-stalled projects in Alaska. The Biden-era rule at the heart of the rollback has shut off millions of acres to drilling and development in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve. Trump officials argue it choked off access to key domestic resources and threatened the nation's energy security. Now the administration says it's restoring the balance. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline has long been the state's economic lifeline, but its output, once 2 million barrels a day, has steadily declined. Today, it's less than a quarter of that. Now, with White House support, state leaders hope to reverse that trend. And at town halls in rural Alaska, Trump's energy plan is drawing cheers from some native communities who say they were ignored by the previous administration. The president of Voice, a nonprofit that aims to create a unified voice for the indigenous communities of North Slope, said Monday too often federal decisions are made without the engagement of the people these decisions will affect the most. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum told Fox News the people who live here know the advantages of this project.
And these folks up here, they care about the land, they care about the wildlife, they care about their communities. They know that this development can be done safely and smartly here.
The Trump administration isn't just pushing to pump more oil, it's also looking to sell more of it overseas. Officials say Alaska's North Slope could become a key hub for exports, with energy-rich partnerships aimed at countries like Japan and South Korea. But environmentalists have criticized the planned rollback of restrictions. Eric Graff, an attorney with the organization Earth Justice, called the Trump administration's intense focus on oil and gas troubling, particularly in a state experiencing the real-time impacts of climate change.
Now an update on how the federal government handles defaulted student loans. The Department of Education says it will not deduct Social Security benefits to collect the unpaid loans. The decision announced yesterday is meant to protect retirees who rely on fixed incomes. Officials say no Social Security offsets have occurred since repayments resumed in May and that the pause will remain in place indefinitely. Roughly 25% of the over $1.5 trillion loan portfolio is expected to fall into default in the coming months. The department says it's working to connect borrowers with affordable repayment options and will begin direct outreach soon. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon is testifying before the Senate Education Subcommittee for the department's fiscal year 2026 budget request. Let's tune into that.
Than what this administration is planning and what this budget proposes. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to do just that.
Well, thank you, Senator Baldwin. And you see we've been joined by the chair of the full committee. I'm going to ask the secretary to give her opening statement first, and then I'll turn to the chair. Thank you. Welcome, Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Baldwin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having me today to represent the goal I share with my boss, President Trump, to responsibly eliminate the federal bureaucracy, cut waste, and give education back to states, parents, and educators. With your partnership, the fiscal 26 budget will take a significant step toward that goal. We seek to shrink federal bureaucracy, save taxpayer money, and empower states who best know their local needs to manage their education in this country. We have reviewed our programs and identified spending that does not fulfill the mandate of trust the American people have placed with President Trump. We have cut old contracts that waste enriching private parties at taxpayer expense, suspended grants for illegal DEI programs, and now are putting forward a responsible budget request that reduces department funding by more than 15%. At the same time, we're working to make American education great again. In our conversations with governors, teachers, and parents across the country, we hear calls for accountability and more local control. That's our goal, to give parents access to the quality education their kids deserve, to fix the broken higher education industry that has misled students into degrees that don't pay off, and to create safe learning environments. We're holding institutions to account when they facilitate discriminatory or hostile environments on campus. A level playing field with limitless opportunity, I think, is a vision that we all can share. Our budget reflects this vision. Its cuts reflect a bureaucracy that is getting out of the way, and its continuations and increases represent smart spending that will help improve student achievement and not serve bureaucratic interests. Our goal is clear: make education better, fairer, and more accountable by ending federal overreach and empowering families, schools, and states who best know the needs of their students. I'm eager to partner with you to make the vision of the future a reality and to ensure every child is part of it. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And I'll turn to the chair of the full committee, Senator Collins from Maine.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, let me first welcome you to the committee. I know that you care deeply about our students. We may have different views on how to best achieve the goals that we share, but I do not question for a moment your deep commitment to education and our nation's students. I've been very concerned that we've seen a drop in performance by our students that occurred since the COVID unwise closures and prolonged closures of schools and continued in the Biden administration, and that's something that should concern us all. I'd like to turn to the TRIO programs. Like Upward Bound, that's an issue that you and I have discussed. From my experience in Maine, I have seen the lives of countless first-generation and low-income students, not only in Maine, but across the country, who often face barriers to accessing a college education changed by the TRIO program. I'm actually wearing my Maine TRIO pin today. just to emphasize my support for that program. In fact, 3 of my own staff members went through the TRIO program and tell me that they would not have pursued higher education but for the support and confidence that the TRIO program gave them. The president's budget, unfortunately, in my view, proposes to eliminate the TRIO programs. And as co-chair of the Congressional TRIO Caucus, I strongly disagree with the president's proposal. Could you explain why the administration has decided that TRIO programs are not worth the investment that they make in people's lives and the robust bipartisan support that they enjoy due to their success?
Want me to answer now?
Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that these programs are very near and dear to your heart. We have had at least 2 pretty lengthy conversations about them. And TRIO will be funded through the end of this year. So all those funds will go out. But it is not proposed to continue in the 2026 budget. What we found is the programs, while I absolutely agree that there is some effectiveness of the programs in many circumstances, these programs were negotiated at very tough terms, in that the Department of Education has no ability to go in and look at the accountability of TRIO programs. It specifically eliminates our ability to do that. And I just think that we aren't able to see the effectiveness across the board that we would normally look to see with our federal spending. So while there are, I think, many instances, and I believe also that Chairman Capito even worked in TRIO for a while in her earlier years, I do think there is effectiveness of many programs that I'm just not sure the total expenditure warrants. I do know, however, that Congress does control the purse strings, and I would sincerely hope that if you decide with appropriations to continue these programs, that we could work with you to renegotiate those terms that we feel kind of hamstrung the Department of Education and not being able to fully understand their accountability. That's a real drawback in these programs, and I think all of us would agree we want to make sure that anything that we are funding, we can attach accountabilities to it.
Well, as with the Job Corps program in the Department of Labor, I think the answer is to reform and strengthen those programs, fix what's wrong, increase accountability, not abolish them. And I look forward to working with you in that regard. I want to move to another issue, and that is a bill that Senator Kaine and I have introduced called the Jobs Act. What it does is allow students to access federal Pell Grants to pay for shorter-term job training programs. A lot of times you can get a license in a trade to become an electrician or welder, for example, or a certified nursing assistant without going through a 2-year community college program. That may be the best option for some people. It isn't for others. Would you support the concept of allowing Pell Grants to be used for short-term training programs that result in a license or a certification for a job?
Well, you're really speaking my language, Senator, and thank you very much for that. I wholeheartedly support these workforce Pell Grant options because I've seen in many instances, we have 8 million open jobs in our country. Our workforce is definitely not being fulfilled by the proper workers. So let's get these young people who don't need a 4-year college education into the workforce sooner. I'm in agreement that even when they're in high school, we should start these programs, in high school leading into apprenticeship programs. But the workforce programs, the short term you're talking about, I also think they can be stacked in credentials so that you can really propel yourself into be a stronger economic contributor. So I'm all for those.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary McMahon, during your confirmation hearing, when asked about spending appropriated funding, you said, quote, if they have been appropriated by Congress, those funds should be disseminated, close quote. You also said that eliminating the department is not about cutting federal funding for schools. Now we have a budget request that significantly cuts funding for public schools, students, and educators. Now, a few days ago, the OMB director said that impoundment is still on the table, threatening to take funding away this year. And we have your spending plan for this year that still leaves more than $8 billion, in your own words, unallocated. Not spending these funds is the administration making a decision not to invest in our children, and that decision has real consequences. What you consider unallocated for this year includes $1.3 billion for before and after school programs, which supports programs for thousands of students in Wisconsin in approximately 150 locations throughout the state, and over $2 billion to support effective teachers, of which an estimated $23 million would provide evidence-based professional learning for educators and help address gaps in access to effective teachers in Wisconsin. Are you going to allocate all of the funding Congress appropriated for students and schools in Wisconsin and across the country this year?
Well, Senator Baldwin, thank you very much for that question. And I understand your concerns. What we have done in putting forward our operating plan, the first operating plan to show where we were making allocations, and then followed up with the second operating plan.
This isn't a nuanced question. Congress passed a law appropriating this funding. You said in your confirmation hearing that you would spend funding Congress appropriated. If the answer isn't simply yes, based on all of the evidence before us, that leads me to believe that you are planning to withhold funding and shortchange schools, students, and families across America.
Well, we're going to continue to look at the allocations, and we'd like to work with you as we continue to evaluate those programs.
We passed a continuing resolution that appropriated funding, and you said earlier that you were going to spend it as appropriated as is signed into law. So I'm going to move on. Secretary McMahon, when we met before your confirmation hearing, you told me that our students' mental health was a priority for you. Yet you recently decided to discontinue mental health grants that Congress authorized and funded on a bipartisan basis because you determined, quote, they were not in the best interest of the federal government, close quote, which makes me wonder what changed since our conversation. Your operating plan for fiscal year 2025 describes this funding as unallocated this year. Your budget request for next year proposes eliminating this funding. Secretary McMahon, do you believe increasing access to mental health supports for students is not in the best interests of the federal government?
We're not looking to eliminate this funding. We are simply continuing the funding, but will allow the states to rebid on the competitive grant basis. And we're evaluating those programs across states. I think that a governor in a state or the local superintendent or the health care professionals that are working in that state have the best opportunity in looking at what is happening in their areas to make those requests for those grants. And so that's what we're looking at.
Secretary McMahon, the grant that you discontinued for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction was being used to expand access to mental health care for students. We're talking about more counselors and mental health professionals in schools. Why did you cut off funding for this grant and take away this help for Wisconsin students in schools?
Well, because I think we have to look at it across the board, Senator, and the goal really is to make sure that the money is being spent in the best places.
What about
for the best
training
professionals.
new school psychologists, like what you chose to discontinue at Alverno College in Wisconsin? Do you think that's also not in the best interest of the federal government?
I believe there are a lot of programs that are in the best interest of the government, but the states and the local areas, I think, are the best place where we need to concentrate, for these particular programs.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, I'm going to add my voice of concern with Senator Collins, and you and I have talked about this on the zeroing out, the elimination of the TRIO and Gear Up programs. You mentioned that I actually did work in one of these programs many years ago. But my state and many of our states, but mine in particular, I think, has a lot of first-time college goers, a lot of students that don't have the aspirational goals either within their family, or they're not looking at how they can achieve education or a certificate or whatever, and that's where I think these programs have been particularly useful. So I would encourage that we look at this again, and we certainly will as a committee, because all of us have this issue within our states in terms of that first-time college goer or student that really needs the extra push, the camaraderie, the community that a lot of these, I've gone to their graduations and been their speaker, and it's really quite delightful to see how far they've come in a short period of time. So I'm going to move on from that question. I want to ask on anti-Semitism. I am the morning before our education, last year, there were protesters at Columbia University. I asked the then secretary, how many people from the Office of Civil Rights have you had actually on the campus to see what's occurring there, to see what kind of violation of civil rights might be occurring on the Columbia University campus. And apparently there was nobody there from the Office of Civil Rights. Your budget proposes to decrease the Office of Civil Rights. How are you, this is not a problem that's going away on our college campuses. We see it now. Now we've got a little bit of a break. It's the summer. How are you going to make sure that the department is taking to ensure that all students, and in this particular case, Jewish students, are able to learn in an environment free from intimidation?
Well, thank you very much, Senator Capito. I think it is pretty evident from the actions that we have taken relative to Columbia and looking into Harvard as well, and fulfilling the promise that President Trump made when he was campaigning that he would not tolerate anti-Semitism on our campuses or discrimination of any kind. So I have personally met with first Katrina Armstrong, who was the president of Columbia when the first issue was addressed, and now with the second, Claire Shipman, who is there now. We've talked about the issues on Columbia's campuses, and we have worked with them, I believe, in how we can solve some of these issues. They have to set their policies and their priorities, and they have to enforce them. They can't allow encampments on campuses. They can't allow students to come on dressed with masks so that you can't identify these students. I think they have to also vet the students who are coming in better to see what kind of backgrounds that they have. Even professors who come on campuses, or are they teaching ideology or more in subjects? So I personally have done this in conversations with these presidents, with other presidents of universities, to understand what their policies are. Our Office of Civil Rights has opened many cases looking at anti-Semitism, and we are actively enforcing that, as well as we have defunded some of Columbia's programs, $400 million there, and about $2.2 billion with Harvard. We're saying we mean business. These programs and policies have to have teeth. They have to be enforced. No student should have to go on campus and be afraid to go to class.
Right. Well, I agree with the substance of what you're saying. My concern is by cutting so much out of that particular, you're one person. You need the support and the backup of that office to be able to investigate these cases. So I'll leave it at that. Let's talk about literacy, because I mentioned it in my opening statement. These test scores are very troubling, I think, and you want to try to figure out how do we attribute to this. It's not like there's not great teachers everywhere all around this country trying to figure out how to get their students' achievement moving up in the right direction. I will say this, my state of West Virginia, the state legislature, in recognizing this, did allocate additional funds for reading teachers in the very early, grades 1 through 3 to try to move our scores up because we have traditionally lower scores. We did actually that did make a difference. Having that extra teacher in the classroom where you can pull a child aside, give them that one-on-one attention really does make a difference. How is the budget that you've put together, is the answer to push it down to the states so that they can make those differences with our literacy and our math scores that we're falling behind? I think it's a chief concern.
Well, certainly, I think just what you were talking about, at your state level, you put an extra teacher in the classroom because you recognize the need there. I think that will make an incredible difference. There have been a lot of programs that have been tried to make sure that we could help students to read, and they've not worked. But what we are seeing in states that are doing programs now that are returning to the science of reading. We saw it in Louisiana in the PASNAPE scores. We have seen it in Mississippi. We've seen it in Iowa. The children that are learning to read and can read by the end of 3rd grade are those that have the greatest opportunity for success. Up until 3rd grade, we read to learn, and after that, we learn to read up through 3rd grade, and then we read to learn after that.
Right. Thank you. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and welcome, Madam Secretary. Since you're the Secretary of Education, I think it's maybe appropriate that we start questioning with a pop quiz. Are you ready?
I never have liked pop quizzes.
I never have either, but I'm going to give you the answers ahead of time. The answers are 8 and 30. 8 and 30. Remember those two numbers. What percentage of high school students in America attend for-profit colleges and universities?
8%.
8%, perfect. What percentage of student loan defaults in America come from students in for-profit colleges and universities?
Must be 30.
It is. Great. You just aced the test. But the problem is that the difficulty these students face becomes a lifetime problem. Imagine, if you will, first-generation college student trying to pick a place to go to school, inundated in high school with glossy brochures for for-profit colleges and universities which promise the sun, the moon, and the stars. The student goes and learns that there are Pell Grants available through for-profit colleges and universities. They hear the promises that if they just attend this school and graduate, there's going to be a good paying job at the end of the rainbow. And it turns out it's all phony. Over and over again, these students are being deluded and deceived. There's much more scam than there is scholarship. There's more hype than there is higher education. So most of them, or at least 30% of them, end up with loans they can't pay back. They never see that job that was promised to them. But they've got one last place to turn to try to get their lives back on track. I've met a lot of these students. Have you met any of them?
I have.
I have seen their stories and heard their stories from them, living in their parents' basement because of student loan debt and no college diploma, or a worthless one from some for-profit colleges and universities. You have a department within the Department of Education for borrower defense. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell me what you understand the borrower defense law to promise?
Well, first of all, I'd like to address how we started the conversation, not the percentages. But this is an issue, sir, that is, I think you well know, is not just relative to for-profit universities. We have many of our universities today that are promising degrees and jobs which are not being fulfilled, even those from very prestigious and elite universities. The cost of college today is so incredibly high that we have many students who are graduating thinking that they were going to have a job, that they'd be able to repay their loan, but the cost of those loans are so high that even if they get that job, it may not, over the course of their lifetime, would be able to repay that loan. So one of the things that we have proposed, and looking at our FAFSA application forms, is providing information even on FAFSA that would indicate to a student who is applying for a student loan, hey, take a look at this. This is the college you're going to. This is the job that you want, and this is about how much money this job can pay. And is this college the right place for you? Or are these courses the right place for you to take? So let's give up front a little more information so that they actually have an understanding of what their opportunity in the marketplace can be.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I want to reclaim my time since it's very limited. The point that I'm making is there is one brand of college and university that is particularly egregious when it comes to deceiving these students. It's for-profit colleges and universities. 8% of high school grads, 30% of student loan defaults in that category alone. It stands out from all the rest. The point I'm getting to is you're hollowing out the Borrower Defense Agency within your own department. This is supposed to be the rescue for these students to finally get back on track and maybe go to a good school one way or the other. Why would you hollow out the resources there and the people that are enforcing the Borrower Defense Rule when we have these terrible numbers of exploitation of students?
Well, and my point is that we shouldn't just focus on those schools. I do know that I totally agree with you. There are some scam universities out there.
Why would you hollow out the people who are supposed to enforce it?
Because I think we're putting other measures in place with the scam.
Give me an idea what you're putting in place that's better than the Borrower Defense Rule.
Well, we just talked a little bit about FAFSA. It's the education up front so that...
I'm talking about the victims, the ones who are already victims. They're in debt by tens of thousands of dollars. They're living in their parents' basement. They have no place to turn. And you're telling me the FAFSA form application is going to help them? How can it help them?
And that's not in place yet, but I think that's going to be very, very helpful. Here's the other thing. Where are our guidance counselors in high schools? Who are they talking to?
I think we're finding...
I think that they need to be totally informed, and I think they need to look at the cost of education.
You're cutting the number of counselors in these schools at the same time.
Well, the counselors that are doing their jobs can provide information to these students.
There aren't enough of them. That's the point I'm making, and the situation is terrible for these students. First-generation students who are being exploited by these schools, they need your protection. They need our protection. They deserve it. They're doing the right thing. And unfortunately, you're reducing the number of people to enforce the law. I yield, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Madam Secretary, I want to welcome, by the way, I want to ask you about the TRIO program that has been mentioned, and its sister program, Gear Up. We spend $1.858 billion a year on TRIO.
Yes.
That's $1,580 million a year. Is my math right?
I think that's right, sir.
And how long have we been spending $1,580 million a year on this program?
I'm not sure of the total length of time of the program.
More than 10 years?
Yes.
So that's over $1 trillion we've spent on this program. And in this program, this $1 trillion we've spent, we give this money, as I appreciate it, to colleges and universities to encourage poor kids to go to college. Is that right?
To provide some of those kids who have not yet been exposed to what it takes to get ready to go to college.
Okay. To encourage poor kids to go to college, right?
Yes.
Okay. And given that we've spent $1 trillion, how many poor kids who otherwise wouldn't have gone to college have gone to college and graduated?
A significant number, I would imagine.
How many?
I don't know exactly.
Isn't that a question we should ask?
I think so, and I'll be happy to get back to you with that answer. You know, the other thing about the...
But wait, Madam Secretary, I'm not fussing at you. Do we have that number?
I don't think so.
I'm looking, we don't have it.
I don't think so, because there is the...
Well, if we were... So we've spent $1 trillion, and we've given this money to universities, and they're supposed to encourage poor kids to go to college. But we don't know how many poor kids went to college who otherwise wouldn't have gone to college, and graduated, right?
Correct.
Well, what do your audits show?
Well, that's the issue. And I mentioned it when I was
Are you able to audit?
We're not. We're not able to audit, and there are constraints against the TRIO program for its accountability. The other issue with...
Well, but I'm sorry to cut you off, but I don't have much time. So we spent $1 trillion. We gave it to the colleges. We said encourage poor kids to go to college. We don't know how many kids went to college because you don't have the authority to audit. How do you know these universities are not just using the money to operate instead of encouraging poor kids to go to college?
I'm not sure.
You don't know how?
No.
Because you can't audit.
Correct.
You understand hope is not a strategy.
Yes, sir.
I mean, if you told the average American, we just spent $1 trillion of your money and we gave it to colleges and universities and we said encourage poor kids to go to college, but we don't know how many kids went to college who otherwise wouldn't have gone and who graduated. You understand the average American would ask us what planet we just parachuted in from, right?
That's right. You know, Senator, if I may, there's one other issue on the TRIO program. What we have found
I'm going to run out of time. You can make it fast.
Take your time back then.
Let me ask you a question about our skirmish with Harvard. And I don't want to get under the merits. President Trump has said that Harvard is violating federal law and he's withholding their money. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And Harvard has responded, we've never violated federal law, but if we did, we give you a pinky promise that we won't do it again. Is that right?
Yes.
And then President Trump said, okay, no offense, but, you know, I just want to be sure. So why doesn't Harvard, I will give Harvard the authority to appoint a monitor, pick whomever they want. The federal government has the right to veto the pick. So if they pick their brother-in-law, that wouldn't be fair. And Harvard has said, no, you just have to trust us. You have to accept our pinky promise. Is that basically what's going on?
Well, and not only that, but Harvard did respond to our request for negotiations with a lawsuit.
Well, but,
so we're in the throes of litigation.
If Harvard would just agree to a monitor, that would solve the problem, wouldn't it?
Might serve part of it. The provost is what vice provost that we've asked that would come on to be one of the monitors on that situation.
I'm way over. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Senator Reid.
Well, thanks very much. Welcome, Madam Secretary. And I'm not a great mathematician, but I think you were talking about $1 trillion. I believe 1.5 billion times 10 is $15 billion. That's a little bit off from $1 trillion. But
I think the budget cuts $1.2 billion for TRIO.
Well, 1.2, that would be $12 billion, not $1 trillion.
Okay.
Fine. Why aren't you recommending an audit for the TRIO program if that's what the problem is?
I'm not allowed to audit it.
Legislatively, you could propose that.
We could propose it, which is what I had said at the very beginning. I would look forward. I would look forward.
You're not proposing the audit. You're proposing to essentially constrain the program, put it into a block grant, and without any request for audit language, which would come from the United States Senate.
Well, that's exactly what I would request.
Well, why don't you
request, if the program goes first,
Secretary?
Yes, I would like to do that. If Congress is going to appropriate again money for the TRIO programs, then I would like to work with Congress, and part of that would be auditing.
Well,
we've found that about 92% of the TRIO funds go to the same people all of the time, the same institutions.
That could indeed imply an audit necessary, but it doesn't validate the budgetary approach you're taking. You're taking basically many programs, combining them into from $8 billion total to $2 billion to a block grant. Now, in Washington, the block grant is the slow path to extinction because next year the request will be for probably $8 billion. And 4 or 5 years from now, when the request is still $8 billion, the cost will far exceed that. That's sort of budgeting 101. So you're really out to eliminate these programs, I think, not to make them more efficient.
That's not true. I disagree with that.
Well,
there are some budget cuts, but what we're asking for is a simplified funding measure, which will be a single grant funding to the states for them to use in the best way possible to make sure their education is working better.
No,
However, the other side of that, if I may, sir, is that we are reducing the regulatory burden. Do you know that 47 cents of every dollar that goes into a school, teachers spend complying with regulations? So if we can take away that regulatory burden, yes, while there are some cuts in the cost of funding, we still give the opportunity to have more dollars because we're reducing the regulatory burden.
But let me understand this. You're very enthusiastic about an audit, but the regulatory burden is so crippling. An audit would impose more requirements on the schools. I just think you're coming and going, and we're not making progress. The cut to these programs is profound, $6 billion. And the states are not going to step up and say, we can do this. I'll tell you why. Because if this budget passed, every state in this country is going to make a difficult decision. Do I save my health care system, or do I save my public education system? Many of them can't do both. And this is will be a profound shock to the education systems around the country. In 1 year, a loss of these funds, and to the students that need it.
Well, what we have found,
Have you ever taken public assistance?
Have I ever taken public assistance? No, sir.
No? Not at all?
No, sir.
Well, many people do. And they need that support to get ahead. And education is a key mechanism to go ahead. I'm over my, no, I still have some time. To get ahead. And it's remarkable. I think, this all sort of started with the GI Bill, when a generation of Americans got to education who never could get before. And then Senator Pell, my colleague, sort of saw that model and increased it. By the way, you're also decreasing the Pell Grants. You're shrinking educational opportunity in the United States for a whole generation and more, and also shrinking our ability to compete internationally and globally, because I don't think the Chinese will slack off in their investments in education.
Senator, I appreciate your comments. However, we have spent $3 trillion since 1980 on education in our country when this department was set up, and our scores have continued to go down. We are not doing something right. And your numbers are a little bit off on a number. We're going to have it's still a cut, but it's about a $4.5 billion cut, not $8 billion cut.
Well, it's a significant cut. And
to be more responsible.
To be more responsible, your responsibility amounts to just surrendering.
Sorry, sir?
Surrendering. We have this crisis in education and literacy, all these factors. What we're going to do is pull back, let the states do it.
No, we'll spend it more responsibly.
I doubt it very seriously.
Well, let's hope we do.
Well, hope, as someone said, is not a plan. Thank you.
All right, Senator Britt.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much for being here today. I want to start with talking about HBCUs. So Alabama has more HBCUs than any other state in the nation. We are proud of the work that is done on those campuses. We know that it helps strengthen student experience, our workforce, our communities, and our future. So if you look across coast to coast, there are about 285,000 individuals that are attending HBCUs, and the Strengthening HBCU program has about $300 million annually allocated to supporting the operations and student services and academic infrastructure. So can you walk us through in the President's FY26 budget kind of what you have put in place to continuing to make sure that our HBCUs can thrive and provide that educational opportunity for so many students that otherwise wouldn't have it?
Well, in a word or in a very short sentence, we are continuing the education support and the budget support that have been for HBCUs. It's one of the promises that the President made, and that's exactly what we're going to continue to do.
Good. And will you make sure that there are guardrails put up to whether it's, assistance for grant administration or technical assistance, that those remain in place?
Yes.
Excellent.
It's very
Thank
important.
you. So you just mentioned that when this department was founded, you said since 1980, we've had spent about $3 trillion, but yet student scores have not improved. One of the reasons I ran for the Senate is I want the unseen to be seen. I want to close the gap between the have and have-nots, and that is why I am so excited and thrilled about your support and commitment to educational freedom and opportunity. When you look at a state like Alabama, we have the Alabama Accountability Act, and we're working to help families better have access to educational opportunities through scholarship, tuition, and tax credits. But we know that the demand it far outpaces the actual supply. So in your FY26 budget for charter school programs, you've taken it to $500 million, which is a $60 million increase. Thank you. My question to you is can you walk us through how these funds will be used to expand options, particularly in rural communities and underserved communities? So when we work to close that gap, these parents have an opportunity and a choice for their child.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Brett. It's very important to the president that all students have equal access to a quality education.
That's right.
And one of the things that he has said time after time is that no child should be trapped in a failing school, which is one of the reasons why he wanted to expand the amount of dollars for charter schools. And I have visited several charter schools and public schools too, already around the country. We can see how innovative that they are being, how creative they are being, with their curriculum, with their content. They are, in most instances, they are outperforming the public schools in that area, in which when I talked to Governor Reynolds, I said, there's always concern. You have charter schools or freedom of, or choice for schools that public schools will go down. And she said, it's just the opposite in Iowa. She said, our public school levels are coming up. The competition is really great. Parents are more involved, and that's one of the requirements. Parents are understanding more that they need to be part of the school board or help to elect the school board members. They're attending the meetings, more conferences with teachers, understanding what it is that their child needs in their community to be successful, to go on for their education.
Absolutely. And I am a public school kid, and I am really proud of it.
So am I.
And I want to make sure that where we have children who are trapped in a failing school, that they have an option and an opportunity and a pathway forward, because education is the great equalizer. As our colleague Tim Scott always says, it is the closest thing to magic that we have in America. So thank you so much for continuing to be committed to making sure that every child has that opportunity to thrive and grow. In my last minute, I want to talk to you a little bit about literacy. Thank you for your commitment to that. I want to understand kind of what your vision is, and I also want to add Alabama to the list of success stories. So we passed in 2019 the Alabama Literacy Act. Since that time period, we have seen significant growth in our numbers and proficiency amongst our third and fourth graders. For instance, Alabama's national ranking for fourth grade reading improved from 49th in the nation when we actually, the year that we put this into place, 5 years later, we've moved up to 34. We believe with intentionality and evidence-based reading instruction and early intervention, you can make a difference that changes a child's pathway forward and opportunity that will be in front of them. So just want to talk a little bit about that. If you can tell me what your plans are there and how we can continue to support great work that's being done in states like Alabama.
Evidence-based literacy is number one on my priority list. And I want to make sure that we are providing the information and the tools, to states for them to see the success that other states have had. I mean, other governors, just like you said in Alabama, have put in place kind of a return to basics or that science of reading, and they have seen incredible results. And that's what I want to continue to see, across the country.
We saw a 9-point tick up between 2003 and 2023 and 2024. Obviously, we have a ways to go, and we're going to continue to be committed to that. But thank you for your commitment to making sure these programs thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Secretary McMahon.
Thank you.
In your testimony, you said that your goal is to make education better, fairer, and more accountable. I think that's something that everyone on this committee could agree with. It's one of the reasons I support the TRIO programs. And I would like to align myself with the statements of Chair Capito and Chair Collins. And I can tell you that in New Hampshire, for the 2024 and 2025 school year, We had 1,468 students who were served by Upward Bound, of which 96% graduated from high school and 87% enrolled in college. 812 college students served, of which nearly 80% graduated with bachelor's degrees within 6 years. So I would say if there is a problem with accountability, let's address that, and I think the TRIO programs keep that information. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because this is making a difference for students who otherwise would not be able to graduate from high school, to get into college, and to have a better future. I've seen it firsthand, like Chair Capito. When I worked at the University of New Hampshire, I had an Upward Bound student who worked with me. She never would have been in college without that program. So I've seen it firsthand, and I know how it works, and I would urge you to reassess whether eliminating those programs is the best way to help those students have a better future. I also want to ask you about a particular issue that we're having in the Mascoma Valley School District in New Hampshire. As you know, schools across New Hampshire and the country have really been challenged by the pandemic, have been trying to get back to some of the successes that happened before that pandemic. And the school district, the Mascoma Valley School District, which is in a rural part of New Hampshire, completed a project to improve ventilation at 2 elementary schools for the student safety. It was a real problem with the HVAC system and ensuring that the students could be safe at school. The school district was approved for late liquidation after facing challenges with finding contractors to do the work. The school district completed the project with the assurance from the federal government that the cost would be reimbursed. Unfortunately, in May, the department denied their reimbursement, even though the school district had followed the rules and had previously received approval from the department. Secretary McMahon, will you work with me to ensure that rural schools, including the Mascoma Valley School District, which undertook these projects to protect their students, will receive the funding that they were promised by the department?
Yes, and I'd look forward to getting back to you on that particular issue as well, Senator. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary. I know that when you were the administrator at the SBA and we worked closely together, you would have been outraged by that kind of denial when a business had been promised the funding. So I'm sure that you will look into it and hopefully be able to help us. Educators around the country have been really struggling to ensure that students with disabilities receive the education they deserve. It's been an ongoing challenge since the Congress passed the Individuals with Disabilities Act, when we promised that we would give a lot more money to school districts than we have. It supports schools around the country through national activities such as technical assistance that can help states improve their special education systems. In New Hampshire, with the help of expert guidance from the National Center for Systemic Improvement, which is funded by IDEA, the Department of Education conducted a successful initiative to raise literacy rates for students with disabilities. Unfortunately, the President's budget proposal recommends eliminating this support. And so I'm not clear on why the department would eliminate programs that are working in states and force them to develop their own programs when there's already an effort that's been successful. So can you help me understand that?
Well, I'm happy very much for the success in New Hampshire. And I know that there are many of those programs around the country that are successful. We're not cutting any of the IDEA funding. It is staying intact. And so the President really has a commitment to make sure that that funding does get into the states. However, there is more flexibility for the states to handle those programs which they think is better for their states. So if that program would be working in New Hampshire, I don't see why it wouldn't be able to continue the way it's operating.
Well, as I understand
and I'd like to get back to you on that.
That would be helpful because as I understand the President's budget would eliminate this successful program that provides help with the National Center for Systemic Improvement.
Okay, let me get back to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Senator Mullen.
Thank you, Chairman. Madam Chair, what's the definition of insanity?
Of sanity or insanity?
Insanity.
Insanity?
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Right. And what was we ranked in reading and math in 1979?
I'm sorry, what?
What was we ranked nationally in math and reading in 1979?
We were very, very low on the totem pole.
We were number one in 1979. Today,
Oh, in 1979.
1979.
Sorry. Okay.
In 1979, we were ranked number one in around the world. Today, in reading, we are ranked 36th. In mathematics, we're ranked 28th. It's not working. What we're doing is not working. We're throwing money at the problem today. We have $1.6 trillion out in student loans. We have 50% of the $1.6 trillion, which is 42.7 million borrowers, that are current, only 50%. 30% is either deferred or in default, and 20% are just gone. Here's what's scary, is the biggest growing population that's defaulting on their loans is 50-year-olds plus. It's a problem. It's a huge, huge problem. So my colleagues want to complain about you making changes. Thank you. Because we're wasting taxpayer dollars, and it's not paying a dividend back, which is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different results. We deserve better. Our kids deserve better. Our taxpayers deserve better. And we have to make changes. So thank you to yourself and to President Trump, who's got the backbone to say, hey, let's make some changes. Can you explain how the budget reduces wasteful spending and ensures taxpayer dollars are used efficiently?
Well, I do believe that as we have combined a lot of our competitive grant programs to a simplified funding measure. So we have cut the total amount. However, as I was mentioning earlier, the amount that is going into the states will be in some states call it a block grant or a single allocation to that state, and it'll be controlled by those closest to the child. It'll be the governor, or it'll be the state superintendent, or it'll be parents and teachers making sure those dollars are maximized within the state. There are a lot of programs, some successful, but not all of them, that have been just awarded. It's a little bit like mission creep. You start a department, you start programs, and suddenly we have 264 different programs in the Department of Education that we're trying to fund and get to these states with not fully having an overall understanding of how well they are doing. So I believe that by consolidating them and put them in a single grant that will go to the states, they can best spend that money. If they need more mental health, if they need an area of concern that's in their state, they know where to send that money much better than the bureaucracy in Washington. So we're cutting regulation, but at the same, we're cutting some of the spending, but we're also cutting regulation to help pay for that.
Well, so that kind of leads to my other questions of what steps are you taking to reduce bureaucracy and streamline the department's operations, which I do appreciate that, because my mother was a special ed teacher. My brother-in-law is currently the principal at Guthrie High School. My aunt retired as a special ed teacher. My two sisters went to school for special ed, and it is frustrating for them to sit in the classroom and not be able to actually meet the students' needs, but have to meet to a testing standard that these students with special needs can never achieve. As my mom used to say when she was teaching back in the 70s, that she taught these kids, how to try to live on their own, how to just simply take care of themselves through hygiene, how to actually be able to understand their finances to some degree, to be able to wash their clothes, to be able to maybe cook a meal. And we hate to take it down that far, but at some point, these kids are going to be out of high school, and taking a test isn't their future. They're taking their tests as learning how to depend on themselves to some degree, to the most they can, to live the fullest life of their potential. And not having the resources to be able to do that in these schools are tough. And so the bureaucracy affects that. And by the way, it affects the entire school too. And so by cutting that red tape, you're helping the teachers, and the teachers are the one that's desperately crying out for help. They went to school to be educators. Let them teach. because they can do a phenomenal job. They have a heart to do something that I don't. I tell people all the time, I don't have the patience to be a teacher. But those that do, I want to give them all the help they can without having to worry about the red tape and the bureaucracy along the way. So I appreciate you pushing this from Washington, D.C., and letting the classroom make this decision for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined by the Vice Chair, so I'll call on.
That was a Senate Education Subcommittee hearing on the Department of Education's budget request for fiscal year 2026. Moving on, the Trump administration has asked for a pause on a second court ruling challenging tariffs that were invoked under emergency powers. The administration asked a U.S. appeals court to put a hold on a judge's order from last week in a case involving two American toy makers. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and an update on U.S.-China trade negotiations.
The Monday filing argued that halting the tariffs would harm trade talks with other nations and make the tariff seem like less of a serious threat. Last Thursday, U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras ruled that two American family-owned toy companies, Learning Resources and Hand to Mind, would be irreparably harmed by President Trump's tariffs. The judge also said the law Trump used to put most of the tariffs in place, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, doesn't actually include anything about allowing tariffs. In another case, a specialized trade court ruled last week that Trump went too far when he used emergency powers to impose broad tariffs. A federal appeals court put that decision on hold, temporarily giving Trump back the power to use those tariffs under the law. Tensions between the U.S. and China are heating up again. President Trump says China totally violated a 90-day trade deal made last month, mainly over Beijing's export controls on critical minerals, materials key to the auto and defense industries. China pushed back, accusing the U.S. of breaking the deal instead. White House officials say Trump and Chinese Communist leader Xi could speak this week. China corners the market on critical minerals processing, and the controls mean that rare earth magnets needed for critical automotive components could slow or stop. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Falkender reacted to the export issues on CNBC's Squawk Box.
They are slow walking the exporting of the critical minerals of magnets in particular that are supposed to be unlocked by that agreement. And so unfortunately, we are getting back to exactly the non-tariff barriers that we have been working with China on for years.
Falkender says accusations by the Chinese regime that the U.S. has violated the terms of the Geneva Trade Agreement due to semiconductor exports are not grounded in reality.
We have long had issues with exporting semiconductors that would go into artificial intelligence. That has never been part of that was not part of the trade negotiations in Geneva.
Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration wants countries to give them their best offer on trade negotiations by Wednesday. It says a draft letter from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative suggests an urgency within the administration to complete deals before the July 9th 90-day time frame established in April. Officials have said that several agreements are nearing completion. Washington has been engaged in such talks with the European Union, Japan, Vietnam, and India, among others. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Next, the Trump administration is optimistic about a trade deal with India. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says negotiations between the two countries are progressing.
I think to be in a very, very good place, and you should expect a deal between the United States and India in the not too distant future, because I think we found a place that really works for both countries.
A U.S. trade delegation is scheduled to visit New Delhi on Thursday and Friday for further discussions. Lutnick said Washington is seeking lower tariffs, especially on agricultural products. The U.S. also seeks greater market access for U.S. firms and increased purchases of defense equipment. Washington is working to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with India, of course. In return, Lutnick said the U.S. is prepared to expand access to Indian exports. U.S. manufacturing activity declined in May, marking the fourth straight month of contraction, while import levels fell to their lowest point since 2009, according to the monthly survey from the Institute of Supply Management, that is. Joining us now to discuss the latest manufacturing report is economist and public policy analyst Michael Busler, who is a professor of finance at Stockton University. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Nice to see you too.
Now, does 4 straight months of contraction in the manufacturing sector indicate potential cracks in the health of the U.S. economy?
It indicates that the U.S. economy is slowing, and there are other indications that would support that also. Most of last year, excuse me, the economy grew at about a 3% annual rate. In the fourth quarter of last year, the economy slowed down to a 2.3% rate. And in the first quarter of this year, growth turned slightly negative. So the economy is slowing down based on looking at total GDP. The manufacturing index is also slowing down. Now, a reading of the index above 50 is growth. Anything below 50 is slowing down. It's about at 48 now, or 48.5. So it's not much below the 50%, the 50 growth target, but it is slowing down. That is reason, I believe, for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates when they meet again in about 2 weeks. They should have actually cut them last month, but they didn't. They're likely not to cut them again in June, although I think that's a mistake. There are clear indications the economy is slowing. Trump's policies, most people support, and they will provide positive results, but they're going to take a little bit of time. The Federal Reserve should step in now and cut interest rates. In the next 2 weeks, you're going to hear a lot of debate about that.
And we'll get into what comes next and what this could all lead to with Trump attracting investment in the United States and other factors. But first, over half of manufacturing GDP is now in contraction. What is driving this sustained weakness in demand, in your view?
I think it's just the general economy is slowing down, and consumers are a little reluctant to spend. Last month, personal income was up 0.8%. That's a huge monthly increase. That's about a 10% annual rate. So consumers are earning income, but they're a little bit reluctant to spend for a number of reasons. They don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. Last month, imports went way up because consumers feared tariffs and are buying a lot of things. Imports this past month, imports have started to go down and indicates consumers are cutting back. I think consumers are getting a little less confident about the economy in the short term, even though the majority polls show the majority of the people do support what President Trump is doing in the long term.
Do you have any concerns here, Michael? I mean, does this cast a shadow over Americans' job security in the sector?
Well, the unemployment and the jobs numbers for last month come out on Friday, so we'll see how they look. The last couple of months, they've looked very strong. We'll see how this month looks. Most economists are forecasting number of new jobs in the 150,000 job range. That's not very strong growth, but it's at least solid growth, and it's not contracting. I don't think people are concerned yet about losing their jobs, although layoffs did go up a little bit last month too. That could be some of the reason why they're a little reluctant to spend. If you're worried about your job, you're not going to go out and spend a lot of money now, because if you're worried about your job, you may need the money later.
Michael, how much of this manufacturing contraction would you say is due to Trump's tariffs?
It's hard to say. One thing with Trump's tariffs is it has disrupted the supply chains. So many, maybe even most manufacturers get at least some components that are produced outside of the U.S. With the tariffs and the uncertainty and some of the disruption in the supply chain, that probably had somewhat of an impact on manufacturing activity decreasing. If you can't get the materials, the parts that you need to produce, you won't be able to produce as much. So I would say yes, in the short term, some of Trump's tariff policy has contributed to a slowdown in manufacturing activity.
In the long term, though, like we were mentioning earlier, do you think the tariffs will buoy the manufacturing sector?
Yes, I'm very optimistic going forward about the economy as a whole. and particularly the manufacturing sector. President Trump wants to see manufacturing brought back to the U.S. He's giving incentives to do that. And already we've seen a couple of car companies, because they could face 25% tariffs. A couple of car companies, Honda and Hyundai, have decided to start building manufacturing plants in the U.S. President Trump wants to bring as much chip production into the U.S. as possible, and that's starting to go up also. So I think in the long term, manufacturing jobs will increase, and that will add to the manufacturing base and continue to add to GDP growth. So we have a little bit of short-term issues to deal with. In the long term, it's very positive. I wrote a column when Trump first came into office, and it was entitled Short-Term Pain and Long-Term Gain. So I still believe that to be true. I don't think the short-term pain will be that great, and I think the long-term gain will be very great.
And that goes in hand with what the Trump administration is asking the American people: patience while these economic shifts play out. Now, to your point about reshoring, according to the latest Allianz Trade Group survey, 9 out of 10 U.S. companies say they expect to bring some or all of their production or sourcing back home to the U.S. in response to new tariffs. Do you think we'll expect this trend to continue?
I do. So again, it takes a little time to do that. You can't just stop buying from foreigners and bring the manufacturing jobs back overnight. It takes time to build plants, although the U.S. does have a large number of shut down factories that can probably be retooled in a relatively short time period. But the whole thrust of the tariff policy, there are two thrusts. One, you want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. so we have a strong manufacturing base. And the second point is you want foreign markets to be opened up to U.S. manufacturers. Other countries, many countries have very high tariffs, and that prohibits, and some quotas even, and that prohibits U.S. manufacturers from selling into those countries. All of the trade deals that will be negotiated will allow American companies to sell their products in these foreign countries, and that will bring up production in the U.S. and bringing back manufacturing, as the 90% of the companies said they intend to at least partially do. That will increase manufacturing also in the U.S. The long-term outlook of this, and we still have a lot of bumpy road to go, but once we get through all this and once the trade deals are signed, I think President Trump announced today he's giving a relatively short deadline for countries to come up with some kind of an offer. So Trump is trying to do this as quickly as possible. It's something that has been going on negatively for the U.S. for decades. Trump is trying to fix it as soon as possible. He's only been in office, a few months now, so there will be some short-term pain. But I think very shortly we'll start to see a lot of the long-term gain, and it will continue well into the future.
Well, we'll definitely be coming back to you, Michael. I mean, this really is a tectonic shift in U.S. trade policy, in manufacturing forecasts. Michael Busler, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Moving on, authorities charged the Colorado firebombing suspect with a hate crime and up to 624 years in prison. 12 victims have been identified in the attack on a rally for Israeli hostages in Boulder. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A horrific incident as a perpetrator threw handmade bombs toward crowds of protesters on Sunday in Boulder, Colorado. The crowds were advocating for the return of hostages held by Hamas terrorists.
Mr. Solomon stated that he had been planning this attack for a year. And he acted because he hated what he called the Zionist group. And when he was interviewed about the attack, he said he wanted them all to die. He had no regrets, and he would go back and do it again.
A Homeland Security spokeswoman said the Colorado terrorist attack suspect, Mohammed Solomon, is illegally in our country. She said he entered the country in August 2022 on a tourist visa that expired in February 2023.
It's acts of terrorism in our country, and that's what this case in Boulder, Colorado is being investigated as. Kudos to our FBI director, Kash Patel, for immediately calling this a targeted terrorist attack. That's clearly what it was. And we know that this individual, this terrorist, was allowed into this country by the previous administration, was foolishly given a tourism visa, and then was illegally allowed to stay. These individuals are going to be deported, and we're not going to tolerate such violence in our country.
The suspect, 45 years old, allegedly shouted "Free Palestine" as he threw the firebombs.
There were 16 unused Molotov cocktails that were recovered by law enforcement in the hours after the incident took place. 16. So I really want to thank the Boulder Police Department. There were 16 counts of attempted murder in the first degree. He's also charged with 2 counts of use of an incendiary device. He's also charged with 16 other counts of attempted use of an incendiary device.
According to court document, the suspect is being charged with a federal hate crime. President Trump said on Truth Social that acts of terrorism will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This is yet another example of why we must keep our borders secure and deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland. In a post on X, the police said that none of the victims in the attack has died. The suspect appeared in court on Monday evening for his first brief proceeding. His next appearance is set for Thursday when charges would be filed. David Lamb, NTD News.
As lawmakers return to Capitol Hill to continue work on the big budget bill, President Trump is doubling down. This as several critics are surfacing in the Senate and as senators prepare to make changes to the bill. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has Trump's latest comments on this front.
Rejects projections that say that this big budget bill will add to the national deficit. In a post on Truth Social on Monday, he said so many false statements are being made about the one big beautiful bill, but what nobody understands is that it's the single biggest spending cut in history by far. But there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. One main issue here with this bill is the impact that Trump's tax cuts will have on the deficit. Trump says that his tax cuts will help grow the economy and that the growth is underestimated in critical reports such as the one that came out from the Congressional Budget Office. So on the surface, reports like this make it look like this bill will leave the country in a worse position economically, but Trump says that's not the case. And one main piece of pushback that we've heard from Republican critics over in the Senate is that it doesn't do enough to lower the deficit. And Trump directly responded to the most outspoken critic, Senator Rand Paul, writing on Truth Social this morning. Rand Paul has very little understanding of the bill, especially the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves to vote no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. Now, this comes as the House is preparing to make more cuts to the federal government's budget in the near future. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking about the separate effort.
I think there may be multiple packages, rescissions packages coming, and we'll process them as quickly as we can. I mean, it's a big priority for me.
He's referring to certain guidance that the White House is sending Congress on certain cuts that DOJ has identified so far and that Congress will then need to approve. Now, this all comes as the Senate has returned and they're going to be working on making changes to the House's version of this big budget bill. But Speaker Johnson warns his Senate counterparts not to change the bill too much, otherwise he'll have a hard time getting it back through in the House. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Next, a federal judge has paused the Homeland Security Department's efforts to end tens of thousands of TSA union contracts. That's the Transportation Security Administration. A U.S. district judge in Seattle issued a preliminary injunction yesterday. The ruling comes after Homeland Security terminated union contracts with the American Federation of Government Employees in March. The judge said the justification DHS offered for ending the contracts was threadbare and exposed the retaliatory nature of the decision. The judge also ordered DHS to notify union officers that the contract and rights are in effect, including the right to have union dues deducted from their pay. The DHS recently said it was ending the union collective bargaining agreement, saying the pact was constraining the TSA's mission to keep Americans safe while traveling. The agency also said that nearly 200 TSA officers work full-time on union matters, even though they're paid by the government. Next, a major push is underway to ramp up oil and gas production in Alaska. Trump administration officials are in the state this week outlining a plan they say will restore American energy independence. Here's more.
President Trump is turning his focus to Alaska's vast reserves of oil and gas, the goal to double the flow of oil through the state's vast pipeline system and build a massive natural gas project to match. Energy Secretary Chris Wright made the announcement at Prudhoe Bay, a cold and windswept hub of oil activity near the Arctic Ocean, joined by Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Wright stood before a group of pipeline workers and officials, calling for what he described as freeing Alaska from limits on development.
The oil is here. The discoveries are here. If we free Alaska and the people here, we're going to more than double the oil flow through the pipeline and build the big, beautiful twin, the natural gas pipeline from the North Slope.
The visit underscores Trump's broader energy agenda to roll back regulations and revive long-stalled projects in Alaska. The Biden-era rule at the heart of the rollback has shut off millions of acres to drilling and development in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve. Trump officials argue it choked off access to key domestic resources and threatened the nation's energy security. Now the administration says it's restoring the balance. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline has long been the state's economic lifeline, but its output, once 2 million barrels a day, has steadily declined. Today, it's less than a quarter of that. Now, with White House support, state leaders hope to reverse that trend. And at town halls in rural Alaska, Trump's energy plan is drawing cheers from some Native communities who say they were ignored by the previous administration. The president of Voice, a nonprofit that aims to create a unified voice for the indigenous communities of North Slope, said Monday too often federal decisions are made without the engagement of the people these decisions will affect the most. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum told Fox News the people who live here know the advantages of this project.
And these folks up here, they care about the land, they care about the wildlife, they care about their communities. They know that this development can be done safely and smartly here.
The Trump administration isn't just pushing to pump more oil, it's also looking to sell more of it overseas. Officials say Alaska's North Slope could become a key hub for exports, with energy-rich partnerships aimed at countries like Japan and South Korea. But environmentalists have criticized the planned rollback of restrictions. Eric Graff, an attorney with the organization Earth Justice, called the Trump administration's intense focus on oil and gas troubling, particularly in a state experiencing the real-time impacts of climate change.
Former California governor and actor Arnold Schwarzenegger told environmentalists to stop whining about the approach of President Trump's administration. He said today he keeps hearing many environmentalists questioning the value of fighting for a clean environment under a government that denies climate change. Schwarzenegger told the Austrian World Summit that his response is to stop whining and get to work.
They said to me, Mrs. Arnold, what is the point of fighting for a clean environment when the government of the United States says climate change is a hoax and coal and oil is the future? When the politicians in Washington don't care. You know what I say to them? Exactly what I said in my movie Kindergarten Cop to the kids. Stop whining. Stop whining.
Schwarzenegger, a Republican, has devoted time to environmental causes since leaving political office in 2011. He pointed to examples of local and regional governments and companies taking their own action. This included his own administration in California. He said that 70% of pollution is reduced at local or state levels. Schwarzenegger added that attacking the president was not his style, and he doesn't criticize any president when outside the country. South Korea is set for new leadership. Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung is projected to win the snap presidential election after President Yoon's ousting. And a reported attack on a bridge connecting Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. Ukraine says it detonated thousands of pounds of explosives. What we know so far.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪 产生微妙的影响。天鹰的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以我希望给你的每一把琴都是首先我所信任的。
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
Welcome back. Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof said today that he would step down. This comes several hours after Conservative leader Geert Wilders quit the right-wing coalition. Prime Minister Schoof will submit his cabinet's resignation to the King later today. Wilders was the leader of the largest government party. He said his party was pulling out because the other three coalition partners were not willing to support his ideas on asylum and immigration. They had not backed the stricter policies he had pushed for. Ministers from Wilders' party will leave the cabinet. The remaining ministers will continue for now in a caretaker government. The other parties in the coalition now have the option to try and proceed as a minority government. Any election will likely not be held before October. South Korea will soon have a new leader. Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung is forecast to win the country's snap presidential election. A joint exit poll showed Lee with nearly 52% compared to conservative candidate Kim Moon-soo's roughly 39%. The election comes 2 months after conservative President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office over his short-lived martial law declaration. Pre-election surveys also suggested Lee appeared ahead for an easy win. Kim has struggled to win over moderate swing voters. His People Power Party is still feuding over how to view Yoon's actions. The past 6 months saw large crowds of people rallying in the streets to either denounce or support Yoon. The winning candidate will immediately be sworn in as president on Wednesday for a 5-year term without the usual 2-month transition period. Israel says the United Nations staff is refusing to utilize nearly 100 aid trucks, which are still waiting in Gaza. Israel's deputy foreign minister today also shared drone footage from Gaza showing what she said were armed, masked men firing at civilians trying to collect aid.
So this shows some of Hamas's tactics to actually try and prevent Gazan civilians from coming and collecting aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Fund collection centers and humanitarian distribution points. This is clearly a threat to Hamas, who has controlled and manipulated the entire population through controlling the aid. we've seen the numbers on how Hamas is actually collecting millions of dollars through the aid that was distributed just a few months ago.
Haskell also accused the UN of fighting against the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the effort to deliver aid to the people of Gaza. That's an American organization established in February to distribute humanitarian aid. The UN says the new system doesn't address Gaza's mounting hunger crisis and allows Israel to use aid as a weapon. Hamas-controlled health officials say Israeli forces fired on people as they headed toward an aid distribution site today. The military denies opening fire on civilians or blocking them from reaching the aid sites. There are new reports of two significant attacks by Ukraine this morning. The first one is an explosion at a bridge connecting Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. That's as hundreds of thousands across southern Ukraine reportedly lost power after a separate attack. Ukraine security services posted this video saying it shows an explosion at a bridge connecting Crimea to Russia. Ukraine says it used over 2,400 pounds of explosives. They were reportedly detonated earlier this morning, damaging underwater pillars. The rail and road bridge is a key supply route for Russian forces in Ukraine. Moscow didn't immediately respond to Ukraine's reports of the attack. Meanwhile, Russian officials say at least 700,000 people in southern Ukraine were without power on Tuesday. This affects two Ukrainian regions currently controlled by Russia. This comes after Ukrainian drone attacks and shelling knocked out electricity substations. The attack appears to be one of the largest of its kind on Russian-held territory since the war began. There was no immediate comment from Ukraine. Staying with Ukraine, a delegation from Kyiv is in Washington today. President Zelensky's chief of staff, the first deputy prime minister, and other government officials are representing Ukraine. They say they want to discuss defense support, the situation on the battlefield, strengthening sanctions against Russia, and more. The officials also plan to discuss the bilateral minerals deal between the U.S. and Ukraine. It gives the U.S. preferential access to new Ukrainian mineral projects. The agreement also sets up an investment fund that could be used for Ukraine's reconstruction. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently announced a visa ban targeting foreign officials who censor Americans. Analysts say it could challenge EU policies regarding digital content published on social media such as X or Facebook. NTD's international correspondent David Vivez has more from Paris.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio last week announced a new visa restriction policy targeting foreign nationals who censor Americans. He said it's unacceptable to demand that American tech platforms adopt global content moderation policies or engage in censorship reaching into the United States. According to some policy analysts, Rubio's emphasis on protecting Americans' rights could directly challenge EU officials and their policies, even within their own legal frameworks. What the current US administration calls free speech censorship is referred to in the EU as content moderation, aimed at preventing discrimination and hate speech. These efforts are enforced through the EU's Digital Services Act, a comprehensive regulation on digital content. While the Secretary of State's announcement was broad and vague, it may serve as a warning to EU officials. Several governments, including the UK, Germany and France, are putting pressure on social media platforms, most of which are American companies.
Mr. Trump's administration wants to strictly apply the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees total freedom of expression and therefore protects against any interference from any government. We're seeing a fundamental clash between two political visions: the U.S. stance to defend free speech at all costs, and the EU's push to impose international standards on content moderation.
In February, Vice President J.D. Vance warned EU leaders during a tour of Europe about the importance of free speech and shared democratic values between the US and the EU. Romain Bessonnet adds there are growing signs that the US administration is serious about confronting EU policies and officials implementing them where possible.
We've already seen a sharp political clash between the two blocs on inclusion and equity policies. The EU wants U.S. companies with European subsidiaries to comply with DEI mandates. Meanwhile, Trump has warned that European companies in the U.S. may lose access to federal subsidies if such policies are imposed. I think the EU should take these warnings very seriously as this administration has shown it's ready to take tough measures against the EU.
In April this year, media have reported EU was preparing to fine social media platform X with a penalty of around $1 billion due to alleged illicit content and misinformation. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Next, the European Union is taking action to ensure trade fairness with China. It is backing a proposal to limit the participation of Chinese medical device suppliers in public contracts. The move comes after a finding that EU companies were not given fair access to China's public tenders. The measures will be the first under a special EU public contract instrument designed to ensure trade fairness. It allows excluding Chinese bidders from larger public tenders or attaching a penalties score to their bids for 5 years to tackle discrimination. The EU Commission has previously said it found clear evidence of unfair tender conditions in China that favored domestic suppliers. Honda partners with LA28 as Olympic sponsorship deals shift into gear. It is the largest domestic partnership for the event. Stay tuned for more on that after the break.
As we naturally age, many people are getting zero amount of this incredible and unique substance. That's when we start seeing an impact in our joints, skin, nails, and even our digestion.
People ask me, Dr. X, what is the #1 supplement I should be taking? My answer is multi-collagen protein.
People's reactions to me, people were like, what are you doing? What is going on? You look amazing. You have a glow about you.
What makes Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen stand out from other brands? 10 types of collagen. It's grass-fed, pasture-raised with vitamin C and probiotics. It's proven to reduce joint discomfort rapidly, continuously, and persistently. It improves the appearance of crow's feet after 4 weeks and improves skin tone after 8 weeks. And it promotes hair thickness, growth, and a reduction in hair breakage.
It has transformed everything from my hair. Like, my hair was starting to kind of just, come out, and I don't have that anymore. My skin feels amazing.
Call the number on your screen and find out how to get a free bottle when you order, plus free shipping and our 30-day money-back guarantee. And as a bonus, we will include Dr. Josh Axe and Jordan Rubin's revolutionary book, Multi-Collagen Makeover, free with your order, plus free shipping and free returns.
I have implicit trust in Dr. Axe because the plan worked. I'm living proof of it.
This is the collagen protein that is backed by clinical studies. It's what my family uses, it's what I use, and I know you're going to benefit in a big way as well.
Love the results or get your money back. This special TV offer is not available in stores. Call the number on your screen or go online now.
Everybody in my house knows how to ride a bike except me. People ask, how your children learn how to ride a bike and you didn't? I didn't teach them. I just created an environment where they taught themselves, and all I had to do was be there.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Days Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Days Enzyme Fermented Coffee.
Welcome back. Disney is cutting several hundred jobs across its film, TV, and corporate divisions as part of an ongoing push to streamline operations. The layoffs will impact marketing, publicity, casting, and finance roles. The company says the move reflects the fast-changing environment landscape and the need to operate more efficiently. It's the latest in a series of job cuts under CEO Bob Iger, who returned in 2022 with a plan to trim 7,000 positions to cut costs. Despite the cuts, Disney recently reported strong earnings with a 7% revenue increase and a surge in Disney Plus subscribers. Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing strict new rules for seniors applying for California's Medicaid program, Medi-Cal. The plan would bring back a test requiring applicants to prove they have less than $2,000 to qualify. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing to reinstate an asset test for seniors in order to qualify for Medi-Cal healthcare benefits. Under the plan, individuals would need to have less than $2,000 in assets, including savings, a second car, and retirement accounts to be eligible. Newsom says the move is necessary to address a budget shortfall as Medi-Cal costs have surged by over $20 billion in the last decade. The proposal would also freeze new Medi-Cal enrollment for undocumented adults as another way to control costs. According to the state's Department of Finance, the rising costs are due to higher enrollment, pharmacy expenses, and managed care. The test was previously required for seniors but was eliminated in recent years. Newsom now wants to bring it back to save money. The administration estimates the asset test would save nearly $800 million by 2029. Advocates for low-income and disabled Californians say the proposal would cause serious harm to vulnerable communities. Disability Rights California says it forces people into extreme poverty just to keep their health care, calling it a dangerous step backward. However, Newsom defended the proposal, telling the LA Times, "None of this is the kind of work you enjoy doing, but you've got to do it. We have to be responsible. We have to be accountable. We have to balance the budget." Christina Corona, NTD News.
The Federal Aviation Administration says it plans to boost the number of flights at Newark Liberty International Airport next week. The move comes after a runway reopened yesterday, nearly 2 weeks ahead of schedule.
We had three problems. One, the runway was getting rebuilt, and again today we're celebrating 13 days early. We had a telecom issue. That new fiber is laid, but it has to be tested. And then we have the staffing issue with air traffic controllers. So all of those things on a rolling basis are going to come online, and as that happens, we're going to be able to expand the capacity of the airport.
I feel the best that I've ever felt about particularly fixing the FAA. And the reason is because Secretary Duffy is on it. He's an action-oriented. He wants to fix it. He's coming to Newark to help.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said if all goes well, the runway should be certified by June 10th. Crews worked day and night to complete the construction project 13 days ahead of schedule. Newark has been plagued by cancellations and delays this spring. The FAA limited the airport to 28 arrivals and 28 departures an hour last month because of the construction and staff shortages. Officials say there are another 16 experienced controllers in training who should be certified by October to help with the shortage. Next, a major deal between Japanese car giant Honda and the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Honda was named the automotive partner for the Games and sponsor of Team USA and will provide a vehicle fleet. Honda will also serve as the partner for Team USA at the 2026 Winter Games in Milano Cortina. LA28 Chairman Casey Wasserman said it was a natural fit given the company's deep roots in the Los Angeles region.
We are here to stand together with all of you to welcome Honda to the LA28 and Team USA family and into the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic movement.
Through our partnership with Team USA and LA28, we aim to help the world's top athletes achieve their dreams on the Olympic and Paralympic stage. Competing and pushing ourselves is how Honda strives to fulfill our dreams.
LA28 has announced half a dozen deals so far this year following the Paris Games. The CEO of U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Properties said as many as 9 more sponsorship deals could be announced before the end of this year. The Games will begin on July 14th, 2028. President Trump has granted full pardons to 2 shark divers. They were convicted of theft in 2022 after freeing sharks from a fishing line off Florida's coast. The two men freed the sharks, believing the fishing line was illegal, and reported it to wildlife officials. Federal prosecutors charged them after finding the line belonged to a fisherman licensed by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Their convictions included probation, community service, fines, and restrictions on voting and gun ownership. Lawyers for the two men praised the pardon, saying justice has finally prevailed. Pro hockey fans already know the Stanley Cup final begins this week as the Florida Panthers take on the Edmonton Oilers. But animal lovers may want to also gear up for the Stanley Pup. The event will air before Game 2 is played Friday. Current and former NHA players will introduce 32 adorable rescue dogs, each representing an NHL team. The pups will compete to show off their canine skills on ice. Wow! There will even be a play-by-play commentary. All the dogs will be available for adoption in their cities. The 2025 Stanley Pup airs on True TV on Friday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. It's also on Sportsnet in Canada and the NHL Network at later times. All right, that's it for today. For round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. We'll cover more stories right here after the break.
Stay tuned to get a free month of home warranty protection. Tired of searching for contractors when your home appliances and systems break down, only to leave you stuck with a huge repair bill and shoddy repairs? Plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and appliance breakdowns could cost thousands.
Hi, I'm Ty Pennington, here for Choice Home Warranty. They protect my home from expensive repairs, and they can do the same for you. No matter if it's your refrigerator, plumbing, or more than 20 other home systems and appliances, Choice Home Warranty has saved millions of homeowners a whole lot of money. For a low monthly fee, you get their nationwide network of trusted local technicians with plans that cover repairs and replacements done quickly and the right way.
I would recommend anyone who is listening to this to call Choice Home Warranty up. It eliminates the anxiety, frustration, and it saves you money.
Don't let an appliance or home system break the bank, leaving you stressed. Call Choice Home Warranty before that happens and get your first month free. Plus, call in the next 5 minutes and we'll give you free limited roof leak coverage. That's a $70 value, free. Just call now.
No more headaches searching for technicians. No more budget-breaking chaos. Just a peace of mind of having Choice Home Warranty at your service. I trust Choice Home Warranty with my home, and you should too.
Year after year, Choice Home Warranty is recognized as the nation's top home warranty and has thousands of 5-star reviews from real homeowners. Experience real budget protection and call Choice Home Warranty now.
Stop throwing money down the toilet chasing contractors. Call Choice Home Warranty now and save big with their special offer of your first month free and free limited roof coverage. Don't wait another minute. Call now.
Call Choice Home Warranty for your free personalized quote and to get your first month free. Call in the next 5 minutes, and as our special offer, you'll receive free limited roof coverage. That's over $100 in savings. This offer won't last long. Call now to lock in your rate and save big. Call 800-216-9114, 800-216-9114.
To celebrate our newest launch, Rev 7, I'm bringing you an amazing introductory offer, plus an exclusive overstock sale that you're not going to want to miss. Rev 7 is our premium energy drink that tastes great and gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. That's because there's no sugar and no caffeine. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7 that for a limited time you can try our 3-pack absolutely free. Or check out our Percale bed sheets. I can't believe I'm even going to say this. Every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes only $29.88, even the queens and kings. Inventory is extremely limited, so order now.
As world markets watch the current trade truce between the U.S. and China, talks of China opening up are cropping up again. It's a phrase with echoes in the past. What happened the last time major calls for economic reform, even government reform, rang out inside China? What took place that fateful day that is still remembered around the world but silenced inside China? Join us to see if global trade is under the shadow of 1989, only on NTD.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. U.S. job openings rose unexpectedly to 7.4 million in April. What the number says about the American labor market. The Trump administration is fighting another legal battle over tariffs, and trade tensions with China rise over critical mineral exports. Trump is doubling down on his one big beautiful bill as senators begin making changes to it and critics are speaking out against it. The latest on the attack in Boulder, Colorado. Authorities say the suspect had planned the attack for more than a year and have charged him with a hate crime. A delegation from Kyiv is in Washington today. This amid reports of significant Ukrainian attacks against Russia. What the officials say they want to discuss with the U.S. For the first time ever, the port city of Rostock is the starting point for one of NATO's largest naval exercises in the Baltic Sea.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Tuesday, June 3rd. I'm Stephanie Cox. Good news for the economy. U.S. job openings rose unexpectedly in April, showing the labor market remains resilient. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said there were an estimated 7.4 million job openings at the end of April. That's up from 7.2 million in March. Economists were expecting a drop in openings for a third month in a row. So this now signals a potential undercurrent of strength in the labor market despite broader economic uncertainty. Employers are also bringing more people on board. Hiring jumped to its highest rate in 7 months, and the number of estimated hires was the highest in nearly a year. But it wasn't all encouraging news in the latest data. Tuesday's report also noted a sharp increase in layoffs. Next, the Trump administration has asked for a pause on a second court ruling challenging tariffs that were invoked under emergency powers. The administration asked a U.S. appeals court to put a hold on a judge's order from last week in a case involving 2 American toy makers. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and an update on U.S.-China trade negotiations.
The Monday filing argued that halting the tariffs would harm trade talks with other nations and make the tariff seem like less of a serious threat. Last Thursday, U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras ruled that 2 American family-owned toy companies, Learning Resources and Hand to Mind, would be irreparably harmed by President Trump's tariffs. The judge also said the law Trump used to put most of the tariffs in place, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, doesn't actually include anything about allowing tariffs. In another case, a specialized trade court ruled last week that Trump went too far when he used emergency powers to impose broad tariffs. A federal appeals court put that decision on hold, temporarily giving Trump back the power to use those tariffs under the law. Tensions between the U.S. and China are heating up again. President Trump says China totally violated a 90-day trade deal made last month, mainly over Beijing's export controls on critical minerals, materials key to the auto and defense industries. China pushed back, accusing the U.S. of breaking the deal instead. White House officials say Trump and Chinese Communist leader Xi could speak this week. China corners the market on critical minerals processing, and the controls mean that rare earth magnets needed for critical automotive components could slow or stop. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Falkender reacted to the export issues on CNBC's Squawk Box.
They are slow walking the exporting of the critical minerals of magnets in particular that are supposed to be unlocked by that agreement. And so unfortunately, we are getting back to exactly the non-tariff barriers that we have been working with China on for years.
Falkender says accusations by the Chinese regime that the U.S. has violated the terms of the Geneva Trade Agreement due to semiconductor exports are not grounded in reality.
We have long had issues with exporting semiconductors that would go into artificial intelligence. That has never been part of that was not part of the trade negotiations in Geneva.
Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration wants countries to give them their best offer on trade negotiations by Wednesday. It says a draft letter from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative suggests an urgency within the administration to complete deals before the July 9th 90-day time frame established in April. Officials have said that several agreements are nearing completion. Washington has been engaged in such talks with the European Union, Japan, Vietnam, and India, among others. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Trump administration is optimistic about a trade deal with India. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says negotiations between the two countries are progressing.
I think to be in a very, very good place, and you should expect a deal between the United States and India in the not too distant future, because I think we found a place that really works for both countries.
A U.S. trade delegation is scheduled to visit New Delhi on Thursday and Friday for further discussions. Lutnick said Washington is seeking lower tariffs, especially on agricultural products. The U.S. also seeks greater market access for U.S. firms and increased purchases of defense equipment. Washington is working to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with India. In return, Lutnick said the U.S. is prepared to expand access to Indian exports. Taiwan is talking with the U.S. on tariffs too. Taiwanese officials said Taiwan and the United States have continued to communicate closely on negotiations, but didn't give any more information at this point. The Trump administration wants countries to provide their best offer on trade negotiations by Wednesday. Taiwan was hit with a 32% tariff before President Trump paused it for 90 days. Taiwan's government said in early May that it had concluded its first round of substantive tariff talks with the United States, describing the atmosphere as frank and cordial. More news on tariff negotiations. British Trade Minister Jonathan Reynolds is meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer in Paris today. The two will discuss how to implement a signed trade deal after Trump announced a 50% tariff on imported steel. Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump agreed to cut tariffs on British cars and steel, but a delay in implementing the agreement means tariffs may rise before they fall. Starmer's spokesperson said the deal would eliminate tariffs on most steel products exported to the United States, regardless of the 50% tariffs announced by Trump. We'll keep you updated on that. And as lawmakers return to Capitol Hill to continue work on the big budget bill, President Trump is doubling down. This as several critics are surfacing in the Senate, and as senators prepare to make changes to the bill. NTD's Melina Wisecup has Trump's latest comments on this front.
Rejects projections that say that this big budget bill will add to the national deficit. In a post on Truth Social on Monday, he said so many false statements are being made about the one big beautiful bill, but what nobody understands is that it's the single biggest spending cut in history by far. But there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. One main issue here with this bill is the impact that Trump's tax cuts will have on the deficit. Trump says that his tax cuts will help grow the economy and that the growth is underestimated in critical reports such as as the one that came out from the Congressional Budget Office. So on the surface, reports like this make it look like this bill will leave the country in a worse position economically, but Trump says that's not the case. And one main piece of pushback that we've heard from Republican critics over in the Senate is that it doesn't do enough to lower the deficit. And Trump directly responded to the most outspoken critic, Senator Rand Paul, writing on Truth Social this morning. Rand Paul has very little understanding of the bill, especially the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves to vote no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. Now, this comes as the House is preparing to make more cuts to the federal government's budget in the near future. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking about the separate effort.
I think there may be multiple packages, rescissions packages coming, and we'll process them as quickly as we can. I mean, it's a big priority for me.
He's referring to certain guidance that the White House is sending Congress on certain cuts that DOJ has identified so far and that Congress will then need to approve. Now, this all comes as the Senate has returned and they're going to be working on making changes to the House's version of this big budget bill. But Speaker Johnson warns his Senate counterparts not to change the bill too much, otherwise he'll have a hard time getting it back through in the House. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The Boulder, Colorado firebombing suspect charged with a federal hate crime. Authorities are investigating the attack as an act of terrorism. And New York's lieutenant governor steps up to take on his boss. The challenger will face incumbent Kathy Hochul. A former hotel security supervisor testifies in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The witness says the music mogul appeared to offer him a bribe for footage showing him beating ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. Those stories and more after this break.
Supermodel Cindy Crawford doesn't just walk the red carpet, she rocks it. At 58, she steals the show and wows the press. Hollywood Life exclaims, Cindy Crawford has never lost her stunning glow. While Page 6 raves, she's still as gorgeous as ever. What is Cindy's secret? It's meaningful beauty. And now with new advanced formulas, it's better than ever. Watch as the appearance of lines and wrinkles are diminished in just weeks. It's no wonder everyone's talking about meaningful beauty.
My makeup artist said, your skin has been looking great lately. What products are you using? And I said, I'm using Meaningful Beauty. And she said, really? I've tried Meaningful Beauty before. I love those products. And then the other lady down in the trailer said, I use Meaningful Beauty. I love it.
Our new and improved formulas deliver age-defying ingredients even deeper into the skin where wrinkles begin. And this brand new offer is Cindy's most exciting ever. Because when you order, you'll get Cindy's exclusive Super Brightening Duo, a $120 value absolutely free. First, you'll get 60 of our Revive and Brighten eye masks, the celebrity secret that visibly smooths, awakens, and restores the area around your eyes. Next, discover the power of our Vitamin C Biphase Brightening Oil for an immediate boost of glamour and glow.
I'm not ashamed to say I am 53 years old. Thank you, Cindy.
The total effect of this free gift package? A red carpet ready complexion. Get all this, a $300 value for just $49.95. But you must act quickly. Results guaranteed or your money back.
So make the call or go online now and put yourself on the path to the most beautiful skin of your life. Trust me, it's worth it.
This special offer is not available anywhere else, so don't delay. Scan the code, go to meaningfulbeauty.com, or call the number on your screen now.
We come from a long line of farmers, and there's a sense of pride with being part of these multi-generational businesses. But there's also a significant amount of pressure. My senior year of high school, my dad made the decision that this world no longer needed him in it. I don't know if he was overwhelmed by the bills and checks that weren't going to be coming in because of the strawberries dying off, but it breaks my heart that my dad made a permanent decision for a temporary issue. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone.
Farmers have to take care of their physical and their mental health, because what's a farm without a farmer?
In the mornings, that's my time. Watching the sun come up, I can have a cup of coffee and exercise if I want to. It helps me start the day with a sense of gratitude.
Yay!
Every day is a new opportunity. Don't forget to check in on yourself. Love your mind.
Welcome back. Authorities charged the Colorado firebombing suspect with a hate crime. 12 victims have been identified in the attack on a rally for Israeli hostages in Boulder. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A horrific incident as a perpetrator threw handmade bombs toward crowds of protesters on Sunday in Boulder, Colorado. The crowds were advocating for the return of hostages held by Hamas terrorists.
Mr. Solomon stated that he had been planning this attack for a year. And he acted because he hated what he called the Zionist group. And when he was interviewed about the attack, he said he wanted them all to die. He had no regrets, and he would go back and do it again.
A Homeland Security spokeswoman said the Colorado terrorist attack suspect, Mohammed Solomon, is illegally in our country. She said he entered the country in August 2022 on a tourist visa that expired in February 2023.
It's acts of terrorism in our country, and that's what this case in Boulder, Colorado is being investigated as. Kudos to our FBI director, Kash Patel, for immediately calling this a targeted terrorist attack. That's clearly what it was. And we know that this individual, this terrorist, was allowed into this country by the previous administration, was foolishly given a tourism visa, and then was illegally allowed to stay. These individuals are going to be deported, and we're not going to tolerate such violence in our country.
The suspect, 45 years old, allegedly shouted "Free Palestine" as he threw the firebombs.
There were 16 unused Molotov cocktails that were recovered by law enforcement in the hours after the incident took place. 16. So I really want to thank the Boulder Police Department. There were 16 counts of attempted murder in the first degree. He's also charged with 2 counts of use of an incendiary device. He's also charged with 16 other counts of attempted use of an incendiary device.
According to court document, the suspect is being charged with a federal hate crime. President Trump said on Truth Social that acts of terrorism will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This is yet another example of why we must keep our borders secure and deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland. In a post on X, the police said that none of the victims in the attack has died. The suspect appeared in court on Monday evening for his first brief proceeding. His next appearance is set for Thursday when charges would be filed. David Lamb, NTD News.
Joining us now to discuss the attack on that rally in Boulder, Colorado for the freedom of Israeli hostages is Jason Johnson, president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and a former police executive. Jason, thanks so much for coming on today. Federal authorities have charged the firebombing suspect, we just heard, with 16 counts of attempted murder and a long list of other charges. This attack is being investigated as a targeted attack of terror. What's involved in that?
Well, he made it clear, this terrorist made it very clear the reason he was there and the reason why he was exacting violence on the people that were there. It's simply demonstrating in favor of Israelis who had been held captive by Hamas. So it's quite obvious what his goal was, is to intimidate them and intimidate others from expressing their First Amendment rights in favor of the state of Israel. And so by inflicting harm and fear due to a political issue, that is by definition terrorism, and that's why he is or will be charged with acts of terrorism. Certainly has been charged at the state level with the attempted murder and murder. And so we'll see this play out on both the state and federal levels.
And what will be involved in confirming that, if, as the FBI is working to investigate this aspect of the accusations leveled against him? How can they? What do they do?
Well, they'll gather lots of evidence. Not only what happened that the other day, he made it very clear what his motivation was when he exclaimed "Free Palestine" while he was doing this, and he expressed the intent to harm what he called Zionists during the act. So that makes it pretty clear what his motivation are, which should be difficult to show that it's an act of terrorism because of that. But of course, they're going to look at everything. They're going to look at social media posts, text messages, phone calls. Who has he had contact with in the United States? Did anyone attempt to help him? It sounds like no one did, and that this was just one person acting. But of course, they're going to explore all of that to see if anyone else needs to be held accountable for this obvious terrorist attack.
And if it is found to be an act of terror and the suspect's still on trial, how could that impact the case?
Well, that's just an enhancement to what would happen. Again, he's likely to face charges both at the state and federal levels, and so he will probably face trials at both levels, and will have terms of incarceration at both levels. And the goal, I guess, for bringing in federal charges would be to just ensure that there is accountability. You know, some states are very soft on crime. Colorado is probably one of them. Now, this is a murder case, so in theory, in any state, he should face a lengthy term of incarceration, even at the state level. But just in case, in order to not let the state have full control of the disposition of this case, federal authorities should, and I think will, bring terrorism charges.
Now, you mentioned a few of the things that we already know about the suspect, Mohammed Salman. He'd reportedly planned the attack for a year. So based on what we know so far, is it possible the FBI had the power to detect this risk early and prevent the attack from happening?
Certainly. That's always the part of any investigation, is to see what was missed. And it seems apparent as it feels like whenever we have a situation with whether it's a mass shooter or some other terrorist, where there were clues that the person was actually bringing attention to themselves, usually via social media, by announcing what their plan was ahead of time. Additionally, given this terrorist's immigration status, he really should have been removed from the country a couple of years ago. And again, another part of this investigation will be to what extent did Colorado or the city of Boulder or the county of Boulder's sanctuary policies contribute to the fact that he was not removed. They have very clear sanctuary policies. Perhaps that's why he chose Colorado as a place to reside and to carry out this attack. We don't know that, but that'll be part of the investigation, is whether federal immigration efforts to have him removed were stymied by Colorado's policies.
Now, this attack comes amid a string of recent anti-Semitic attacks here in the U.S., and also a broader increase since the attack on Israel in October of 2023. How are authorities responding to and managing this increase?
Well, you know, unfortunately, it depends on the locale. The different states and different political subdivisions within states have treated this anti-Semitic protests, riots, attacks differently. It's been permitted on the campus of certain universities. Intimidation of Jewish students and the like have been openly permitted. Now, the Trump administration has announced its intention to really crack down on that, in particular with some of the Ivy League colleges. And I think it has the similar policies with respect to even off of college campuses, local authorities essentially tolerating anti-Semitic acts by others, acts of violence or other acts that I think is really, really needs to come under scrutiny of the Trump Justice Department, and I think will.
And what do you think needs to happen to turn this all around? You've mentioned higher scrutiny, but is there anything else at the federal level, even at the state level, and also what just folks out there can do if they want to help?
Well, a lot of it is rhetoric. Obviously, some of the rhetoric we hear by even elected officials have been very tolerant of these anti-Semitic acts. We need to see that rhetoric change, where our leaders, regardless of what their political party is, roundly condemn these acts, even anti-Semitic rhetoric. This cannot exist in the United States. No other group, racial or religious or other minority group, would be subject to it. No one would allow it. It's unfortunate that some elected leaders have been very tolerant of this. That needs to change. And of course, there needs to be strict accountability for anyone who would engage in an act of violence for any reason, and especially if the reason is because of one's race, religion, or other characteristic.
Well, it's been great to speak with you today. Thank you so much for bringing your perspective and insights on this issue. Jason Johnson, good to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And next, students and residents in Colorado are reacting to Sunday's firebombing in Boulder. The attack has left the college town and the country in shock, of course. Meanwhile, Jewish students are desperate to sound the alarm on violent anti-Semitic acts across the nation. NTD's Andrew Thomas has that story.
Beneath the idyllic Rocky Mountains, Boulder residents are trying to cope with Sunday's attack. Colorado State University student Alexandra Posnock left flowers at the scene to honor the victims.
My first reaction was,
oh my gosh, this happened in our community, but I wasn't shocked because this happened last week in New York with Yarn and Sarah. And this has continued to happen at every protest. People have been pepper sprayed, Jews have been attacked.
Ethan Babbage struggled to describe his emotions. The Arvada, Colorado resident spoke softly.
I felt a lot of shock. I didn't quite know how to process it. There was some anger, there was sadness, grief, a lot of things mixed together. And today I've really been kind of sitting with all of that and trying to be with it.
University of Colorado graduate Gil Esqueo met a friend at the site of the attack on Pearl Street Mall. They both wore Star of David necklaces while strolling with their dog.
I believe this was probably inspired by the DC attack that happened recently. I'm terrified to find out who gets inspired by this attack. I only pray that someone will be there who has the wisdom to know the right from wrong and the courage to act on what's right.
Posnock is worried about positive reactions to the attack.
I have seen people online openly celebrating this attack, saying that they deserved it because they are Zionists. And when we just shrug this off and say, oh, these people just disagree with us, no, they disagree with the fundamental values of American society.
Babbage says the world needs to take notice.
This kind of pain and suffering has been going on in our world for a long time. And it's heartbreaking to see it up close. And I think we can't ignore it, is the first step.
Esqueo says many Israelis just want peace.
Speaking on for a lot of Israeli people in Israel, we want the war to stop. We want the fighting to stop. We want our sons and daughters to come home. We want the hostages and the bodies to be returned, to be buried properly and given the right respect.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A major push is underway to ramp up oil and gas production in Alaska. Trump administration officials are in the state this week outlining a plan they say will restore American energy independence. Here's more on that story.
President Trump is turning his focus to Alaska's vast reserves of oil and gas, the goal to double the flow of oil through the state's vast pipeline system and build a massive natural gas project to match. Energy Secretary Chris Wright made the announcement at Prudhoe Bay, a cold and windswept hub of oil activity near the Arctic Ocean, joined by Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Wright stood before a group of pipeline workers and officials, calling for what he described as freeing Alaska from limits on development.
The oil is here. The discoveries are here. If we free Alaska and the people here, we're going to more than double the oil flow through the pipeline and build the big, beautiful twin, the natural gas pipeline from the North Slope.
The visit underscores Trump's broader energy agenda to roll back regulations and revive long-stalled projects in Alaska. The Biden-era rule at the heart of the rollback has shut off millions of acres to drilling and development in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve. Trump officials argue it choked off access to key domestic resources and threatened the nation's energy security. Now the administration says it's restoring the balance. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline has long been the state's economic lifeline, but its output, once 2 million barrels a day, has steadily declined. Today, it's less than a quarter of that. Now, with White House support, state leaders hope to reverse that trend. And at town halls in rural Alaska, Trump's energy plan is drawing cheers from some native communities who say they were ignored by the previous administration. The president of Voice, a nonprofit that aims to create a unified voice for the indigenous communities of North Slope, said Monday too often federal decisions are made without the engagement of the people these decisions will affect the most. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum told Fox News the people who live here know the advantages of this project.
And these folks up here, they care about the land, they care about the wildlife, they care about their communities. They know that this development can be done safely and smartly here.
The Trump administration isn't just pushing to pump more oil, it's also looking to sell more of it overseas. Officials say Alaska's North Slope could become a key hub for exports, with energy-rich partnerships aimed at countries like Japan and South Korea. But environmentalists have criticized the planned rollback of restrictions. Eric Graff, an attorney with the organization Earth Justice, called the Trump administration's intense focus on oil and gas troubling, particularly in a state experiencing the real-time impacts of climate change.
Former California governor and actor Arnold Schwarzenegger told environmentalists to stop whining about the approach of President Trump's administration. He said today he keeps hearing many environmentalists questioning the value of fighting for a clean environment under a government that denies climate change. Schwarzenegger told the Austrian World Summit that his response is to stop whining and get to work.
They said to Mrs. Arnold, I mean, what is the point of fighting for a clean environment when the government of the United States says climate change is a hoax and coal and oil is the future? When the politicians in Washington don't care. You know what I said to them? Exactly what I said in my movie Kindergarten Cop to the kids. Stop whining. Stop whining.
Schwarzenegger, a Republican, has devoted time to environmental causes since leaving political office in 2011. He pointed to examples of local and regional governments and companies taking their own action. This included his own administration in California. He said 70% of pollution is reduced at local or state level. Schwarzenegger added that attacking the president was not his style, and he doesn't criticize any president when outside the U.S. A federal judge has paused the Homeland Security Department's effort to end tens of thousands of TSA union contracts. That's the Transportation Security Administration. A U.S. district judge in Seattle issued a preliminary injunction yesterday. The ruling comes after Homeland Security terminated union contracts with the American Federation of Government Employees in March. The judge said the justification DHS offered for ending the contracts was threadbare and exposed the retaliatory nature of the decision. The judge also ordered DHS to notify union officers that the contract and rights are in effect, including the right to have union dues deducted from their pay. The DHS recently said it was ending the union collective bargaining agreement, saying the pact was constraining the TSA's mission to keep Americans safe while traveling. The agency also said that nearly 200 TSA officers work full-time on union matters, even though they're paid by the government. New York's lieutenant governor is running to replace his boss, Governor Kathy Hochul. The former congressman is set to face off against the incumbent in the 2026 Democratic primary. The candidate posted his campaign announcement yesterday on X.
What we need right here in New York is bold, decisive, transformational leadership.
Antonio Delgado has been serving with Hochul since 2022. In February, the 48-year-old announced that he wouldn't join her re-election campaign. A public rift developed when Delgado called for New York City Mayor Eric Adams' resignation. The Democrat also advocated for former President Biden to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. Hochul, on the other hand, backed Biden's re-election bid. She also refused to remove Adams amid allegations of corruption and bribery. Sean Diddy Combs is in court for another day of testimony in his sex trafficking trial. The Bad Boy Records founder has pleaded not guilty. Former Intercontinental Hotel security supervisor Eddie Garcia was first to take the stand. He was an employee at the Los Angeles Hotel in March 2016, where video footage captured Combs beating his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Garcia took the stand briefly yesterday to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Prosecutors offered him an immunity deal for his testimony. Garcia said he didn't initially recognize Combs or Ventura in the video, but later learned who they were. After the incident, Garcia said an employee for Combs called his personal cell phone number. According to Garcia, Combs eventually joined the call himself, allegedly worried that the footage would destroy his career. Garcia testified that he told the music mogul that he did not have access to the video. Garcia added that he thought Combs appeared to offer him a bribe for the footage. Closing arguments in Harvey Weinstein's retrial in New York are underway today. They follow 6 weeks of testimony. The disgraced 73-year-old Hollywood producer is facing charges from alleged sexual assault incidents between 2006 and 2013. They include allegations from 3 different women. Prosecutors say Weinstein used his power and influence to prey on women with industry career aspirations. Weinstein's 2020 conviction was overturned by the New York Court of Appeals last year. And his first week after leaving the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk's companies are seeing some welcoming developments. Musk's neurotechnology company Neuralink announced a $650 million funding round. And Tesla is seeing sales in Norway skyrocket, a 213% increase year over year in the month of May. The number of cars sold reached 2,600 vehicles. It was driven largely by strong demand for the updated Tesla Model Y. Tesla is also offering zero-interest loans in Norway. Electric vehicles now make up over 90% of all car sales in Norway, leading the country's goal to phase out gas and diesel cars. An update on how the federal government handles defaulted student loans. The Department of Education says it will not deduct Social Security benefits to collect the unpaid loans. The decision announced yesterday is meant to protect retirees who rely on fixed incomes. Officials say no Social Security offsets have occurred since repayments resumed in May, and that the pause will remain in place indefinitely. Roughly 25% of the over $1.5 trillion loan portfolio is expected to fall into default in the coming months. The department says it's working to connect borrowers with affordable repayment options and will begin direct outreach soon. Up ahead, Dutch Prime Minister Schoof is stepping down. The move comes just hours after Conservative leader Wilders quit the coalition. The EU moves to block Chinese medical device makers from public contracts, citing unfair trade practices. And South Korea is set for new leadership. Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung is projected to win the snap presidential election after President Yoon's ousting. Those stories and more after this break.
I was a young dad of 3 amazing kids. I was finally following my dream. Just when you feel like life is starting to come together, you get kind of hit in the face. I was born with a congenital heart defect and had open heart surgery as a kid. I was supposed to go to the heart doctor once a year, and I finally went. He listened to my heart, and I'll never forget, he sat back and he said, yeah, it's time for open heart surgery, or you risk your aorta rupturing, and that's it. I was scared out of my mind. The night before my open heart surgery, I made a goodbye video for my kids. Be strong. Take care of your mom. I love you guys.
Seeing, all the kids hug him goodbye and hoping that they were going to be able to hug him again.
I love you. But I did make it, thanks to the work of the American Heart Association. So that's why I'm asking you to join me. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help get the next person trained in CPR, get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care, as well as fund the next medical breakthrough like these heart valves that helped save my life. When you give $19 a month with your credit card, we'll send you this special t-shirt to show you're a part of our community of monthly donors.
I'm most grateful that I get to have a husband that I get to grow old with, and a husband that gets to be there for his children.
I believe without the American Heart Association, I would not be here today. If this can happen to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to anybody. Your donation can literally help save a life. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor.
I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof has said today that he would step down. This comes several hours after Conservative leader Geert Wilders quit the right-wing coalition. Prime Minister Schoof said he will submit his cabinet's resignation to the king later today. Wilders was the leader of the largest government party. He said his party was pulling out because the other three coalition partners were not willing to support his ideas on asylum and immigration. They had not backed the stricter policies he had pushed for. Ministers from Wilders' party will leave the cabinet. The remaining ministers will continue for now in a caretaker government. The other parties in the coalition now have the option to try and proceed as a minority government. Any election will likely not be held before October, though. There are new reports of two significant attacks by Ukraine this morning. The first one is an explosion at a bridge connecting Russia to the Crimean Peninsula. That's as hundreds of thousands across southern Ukraine reportedly lost power after a separate attack. Ukraine's security service posted this video saying it shows an explosion at a bridge connecting Crimea to Russia. Ukraine says it used over 2,400 pounds of explosives. They were reportedly detonated early this morning, damaging underwater pillars. The rail and road bridge is a key supply route for Russian forces in Ukraine. Moscow did not immediately respond to Ukraine's reports of the attack. Meanwhile, Russian officials say at least 700,000 people in southern Ukraine were without power today. This affects two Ukrainian regions currently controlled by Russia. This comes after Ukrainian drone attacks and shelling reportedly knocked out electricity substations. The attack appears to be one of the largest of its kind on Russian-held territory since the war began. There was no immediate comment from Ukraine on that. One of NATO's largest naval exercises will soon be underway in the Baltic Sea. This year, the annual Baltic Operations, or Baltops exercise, started from Rostock, Germany for the first time. The exercise involves 50 ships, 25 aircraft, and 9,000 personnel from 17 NATO countries. The U.S. Navy's 6th Fleet will lead the drills. They'll focus on amphibious operations, air defense, and mine clearance. The exercises will run from Thursday to June 20th. At the same time, Russia also announced it would hold its naval exercises with 20 warships in the Baltic Sea. That's 1 month earlier than usual. The timing raises concerns about potential confrontations. Environmental activists removed a wax statue of French President Emmanuel Macron from the Grevin Museum in Paris today. A Greenpeace spokesperson said the activists had entered the museum as regular visitors and went to the room displaying Macron's wax statue. They quickly took the statue and exited the building where other activists were waiting with a car. They put it in front of the Russian embassy to protest against French business ties with Russia and a lack of climate action. Greenpeace said Macron should not be exhibited in a major cultural institution until he ends French contracts with Russia and leads stronger environmental action in Europe. Authorities said today that more than 200 prisoners escaped in the southern Pakistani city of Karachi. At least one was killed in a shootout that also wounded 3 prison staff. The escape happened after they were allowed to leave their cells following a series of earthquake tremors. A senior police official said 216 inmates fled the prison before dawn. 78 of those had been recaptured, and no one convicted or facing trial as a militant is among those who fled. He said the situation has been brought under control and police are conducting raids to capture the remaining escapees. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently announced a visa ban targeting foreign officials who censor Americans. Analysts say it could challenge EU policies regarding digital content published on social media, such as X or Facebook. NTD's international correspondent David Vivaz has more on that from Paris.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio last week announced a new visa restriction policy targeting foreign nationals who censor Americans. He said it's unacceptable to demand that American tech platforms adopt global content moderation policies or engage in censorship reaching into the United States. According to some policy analysts, Rubio's emphasis on protecting Americans' rights could directly challenge EU officials and their policies, even within their own legal frameworks. What the current US administration calls free speech censorship is referred to in the EU as content moderation, aimed at preventing discrimination and hate speech. These efforts are enforced through the EU's Digital Services Act, a comprehensive regulation on digital content. While the Secretary of State's announcement was broad and vague, it may serve as a warning to EU officials. Several governments, including the UK, Germany and France, are putting pressure on social media platforms, most of which are American companies.
Mr. Trump's administration wants to strictly apply the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees total freedom of expression and therefore protects against any interference from any government. We're seeing a fundamental clash between two political visions: the U.S. stance to defend free speech at all costs, and the EU's push to impose international standards on content moderation.
In February, Vice President J.D. Vance warned EU leaders during a tour of Europe about the importance of free speech and shared democratic values between the US and the EU. Romain Bessonnet adds there are growing signs that the US administration is serious about confronting EU policies and officials implementing them where possible.
We've already seen a sharp political clash between the two blocs on inclusion and equity policies. The EU wants U.S. companies with European subsidiaries to comply with DEI mandates. Meanwhile, Trump has warned that European companies in the U.S. may lose access to federal subsidies if such policies are imposed. I think the EU should take these warnings very seriously. As this administration has shown, it's ready to take tough measures against the EU.
In April this year, media have reported EU was preparing to fine social media platform X with a penalty of around $1 billion due to alleged illicit content and misinformation. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
The European Union is taking action to ensure trade fairness with China. It's backing a proposal to limit the participation of Chinese medical device suppliers in public contracts. The move comes after a finding that EU companies were not given fair access to China's public tenders. The measures will be the first under a special EU public contract instrument designed to ensure trade fairness. It allows excluding Chinese bidders from larger public tenders or attaching a penalty score to their bids for 5 years to tackle discrimination. The EU Commission has previously said it found clear evidence of unfair tender conditions in China that favored domestic suppliers. South Korea will soon have a new leader. Liberal candidate Lee Jae-myung is forecast to win the country's snap presidential election. A joint exit poll showed Lee with nearly 52% to conservative candidate Kim Moo-soo's roughly 39%. The election comes 2 months after conservative President Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from office over his short-lived martial law declaration. Pre-election surveys also suggested Lee appeared headed for an easy win. Kim has struggled to win over moderate swing voters. His People Power Party is still feuding over how to view Yoon's actions. The past 6 months saw large crowds of people rallying in the streets to either denounce or support Yoon. The winning candidate will immediately be sworn in as president on Wednesday for a 5-year term without the usual 2-month transition period. Over in Japan, the country's farm minister said today the government stood ready to offer more stockpiled rice. Consumers formed long lines to snatch up cheap emergency use grain made available through some retailers. Here's that story.
It's a shocking sight in Japan. Long lines of desperate shoppers forming to buy the most everyday of staples, rice. That was the situation at locations around the country this week as consumers scrambled to get their hands on cheap government-issued stocks. The rice started hitting shelves over the weekend after ministers began selling grains from emergency stockpiles direct to retailers. That saw people waiting for hours outside major stores including Aeon and Ito Yokado. It all comes after rice prices doubled over the past year, partly due to high temperatures hitting harvests. This shopper says she is counting on the government to help. She told Reuters she had all but run out of rice and was switching to bread and noodles. Now the government rice is available at about $14 for 5 kilograms, or about half regular store prices. Farm Minister Shinjiro Koizumi said action was also needed to protect domestic production.
If these high prices continue to go unchecked, the shelves will be filled with imported rice. I would like to reiterate that we are releasing our stockpiled rice in order to prevent this from happening.
Koizumi said the government stood ready to release its entire stockpile if necessary, but it remains to be seen how the emergency release will affect regular retail prices. Now this year's harvest is at least expected to be better. Imports of rice have also increased but remain tiny, with Japan imposing steep tariffs to protect domestic growers.
And still to come, years of steady growth gone by. Peregrine falcon populations are now showing signs of decline. Yet these resilient birds seem to be adapting to the changes too. NHL's Stanley Pup is back. Meet the 32 rescue dogs competing for leader of the pack. Those stories and more after this break.
Say goodbye to harsh, bitter coffee and hello to a delicious, smooth brew. With specialty quality beans, expertly roasted in-house, you'll taste the difference with every sip. Fermented with a blend of 50 enzymes, Days Coffee delivers a rich brew like no other. Made with the highest grade specialty beans available, you're sure to taste the difference. Elevate your morning with Days Enzyme Fermented Coffee.
Got a new house.
I think I finally found a place that I call home.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. We'd never make a separate dinner. And never do that. We'd never let them sleep in our room. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris. Okay, well, I'm not at my desk right now.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how's sketches? Ready? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, Backpack Kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutVaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
President Trump has granted full pardons to 2 shark divers. They were convicted of theft in 2022 after freeing sharks from a fishing line off Florida's coast. The 2 men freed the sharks believing the fishing line was illegal and reported it to wildlife officials. Federal prosecutors charged them after finding the line belonged to a fisherman licensed by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Their convictions included probation, community service, fines, and restrictions on voting and gun ownership. Lawyers for the two men praised the pardons, saying the justice has finally prevailed. And the number of once imperiled peregrine falcons in the U.S. had rebounded in recent years thanks to conservation efforts, but in some areas, their numbers are dropping again because of bird flu. This has decimated other bird populations in recent years.
Falcons in coastal parts of the country have been hit hard, but researchers say those living in some of the country's biggest cities are thriving.
Well, peregrine falcons, they are typically a cliff-dwelling species, more in a natural area. But here in New York City and other cities around the world, since they're a worldwide species, they do adapt quite well to bridges, buildings, towers.
Their populations declined with the use of the pesticide DDT, which infiltrated the food chain and made their shells too weak to hatch. In 1972, DDT was banned, and conservationists began bringing the birds back from the brink. Their numbers began dropping again, though, with the bird flu outbreak.
And for the last almost 3 decades, the Port Authority has hosted a pair of endangered peregrine falcons nesting on the bridge itself.
But it's not all doom and gloom. Peregrines that made nests among the glass and steel of big cities seem to have avoided the worst of the bird flu outbreak, decimating their country cousins.
In New York City, we are at the point where we're probably the most concentrated, populated peregrine falcon nesting in the whole world at this point. We have about 30 nesting pairs throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City.
Some even made a home on the busy George Washington Bridge. New York State conservation officials estimate that the Big Apple has the largest urban population of peregrines around.
Inside an apartment in western Mexico City, a 75-year-old lady runs a hummingbird sanctuary from her bedroom. She rehabilitates sick birds and releases upwards of 300 annually. Here's more on that story.
Katia Latouf gently scoops a sick hummingbird into her hand and begins feeding. It's a regular occurrence for the 75-year-old, who runs a hummingbird sanctuary from her bedroom in Mexico City. The unusual arrangement came out of a favor for a friend. In 2009, Latouf was grieving the death of her husband and had been diagnosed with cancer when she was asked to help care for an abandoned baby hummingbird. Latouf had experience with nursing birds and found solace in her newfound companion, a hummingbird she named Gucci.
He was my first hummingbird. I've always loved animals, but after that, every time Gucci saw I was sad, he flew towards me and stood on my neck. He would get inside my clothes as if saying, "Cheer up, what's going on?" If I responded, "Gucci, I don't want to play right now," he would stand on my computer screen.
Latouf decided to open up her own sanctuary in 2012, and it now releases between 200 and 300 hummingbirds each year. According to Latouf, factors such as extreme heat or heavy rainfall affect the survival rate of these delicate creatures, as do predators like cats and grackles. She examines each bird, which is usually brought over by people who find them injured on the street. From there, they receive a diagnosis and treatment begins. When the birds are strong enough, they're released back into the wild. The sanctuary also includes a special enclosure for injured birds and a nursery for babies who are hand-fed every 15 minutes by Latouf's assistant, Cecilia.
If 30 minutes have gone by and they haven't been fed, they come and stand on Ceci's shoulder or my head or hand, as if they're saying, "It's my time to eat."
In addition to running the sanctuary, Latouf is a health coach, supporting cancer patients through their treatment. The sanctuary operates without donations and is financed through proceeds from a book Latouf authored about her experiences and expertise as a health coach.
Let's be pollinators like the hummingbirds. I get asked what this means. Hummingbirds pollinate. They go from flower to flower doing good acts. God has given all humans different talents, but He never told us to lock these in a safe.
And next, pro hockey fans already know the Stanley Cup finals begin this week as the Florida Panthers take on the Edmonton Oilers. But animal lovers may want to also gear up for the Stanley Pup. The event will air before Game 2 is played Friday. Current and former NHL players will introduce 32 adorable rescue dogs, each representing an NHL team. The pups will compete to show off their canine skills on ice. There will even be play-by-play commentary. All the dogs will be available for adoption in their cities. The 2025 Stanley pup airs on True TV on Friday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It'll also air on Sportsnet in Canada and the NHL Network at later times. All right, stay with us. We'll bring you more news right after this break.
As world markets watch the current trade truce between the U.S. and China, talks of China opening up are cropping up again. It's a phrase with echoes in the past. What happened the last time major calls for economic reform, even government reform, rang out inside China? What took place that fateful day that is still remembered around the world but silenced inside China? Join us to see if global trade is under the shadow of 1989, only on NTD.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. U.S. job openings rose unexpectedly to 7.4 million in April. What the number says about the American labor market. The Trump administration's fighting another legal battle over tariffs, and trade tensions with China rise over critical mineral exports. Trump is doubling down on his one big beautiful bill as senators begin making changes to it and critics are speaking out against it. The latest on the attack in Boulder, Colorado. Authorities say the suspect had planned the attack for more than 1 year and have charged him with a hate crime.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Tuesday, June 3rd. I'm Stephanie Cox. Good news for the economy. U.S. job openings rose unexpectedly in April, showing the labor market remains resilient. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said there were an estimated 7.4 million job openings at the end of April. That's up from 7.2 million in March. Economists were expecting a drop in openings for a third month in a row. This now signals a potential undercurrent of strength in the labor market, despite broader economic uncertainty. Employers are also bringing more people on board. Hiring jumped to its highest rate in 7 months, and the number of estimated hires was the highest in nearly a year. But it wasn't all encouraging news in the latest data. Tuesday's report also noted a sharp increase in layoffs. In his first week after leaving the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk's companies are seeing some welcoming developments. Musk's Neuralink technology company, Neuralink, announced a $650 million funding round. And Tesla is seeing sales in Norway skyrocket, a 213% increase year over year in the month of May. The number of cars sold reached 2,600 vehicles. It was driven largely by strong demand for the updated Tesla Model Y. Tesla is also offering zero-interest loans in Norway. Electric vehicles now make up over 90% of all car sales in Norway, nearing the country's goal to phase out gas and diesel cars. And the Trump administration has asked for a pause on a second court ruling challenging tariffs that were invoked under emergency powers. The administration asked a U.S. appeals court to put a hold on a judge's order from last week in a case involving two American toy makers. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that and an update on U.S.-China trade negotiations.
The Monday filing argued that halting the tariffs would harm trade talks with other nations and make the tariff seem like less of a serious threat. Last Thursday, U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras ruled that two American family-owned toy companies, Learning Resources and Hand to Mind, would be irreparably harmed by President Trump's tariffs. The judge also said the law Trump used to put most of the tariffs in place, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, doesn't actually include anything about allowing tariffs. In another case, a specialized trade court ruled last week that Trump went too far when he used emergency powers to impose broad tariffs. A federal appeals court put that decision on hold, temporarily giving Trump back the power to use those tariffs under the law. Tensions between the U.S. and China are heating up again. President Trump says China totally violated a 90-day trade deal made last month, mainly over Beijing's export controls on critical minerals, materials key to the auto and defense industries. China pushed back, accusing the U.S. of breaking the deal instead. White House officials say Trump and Chinese Communist leader Xi could speak this week. China corners the market on critical minerals processing, and the controls mean that rare earth magnets needed for critical automotive components could slow or stop. Deputy Treasury Secretary Michael Falkender reacted to the export issues on CNBC's Squawk Box.
They are slow walking the exporting of the critical minerals, of magnets in particular, that are supposed to be unlocked by that agreement. And so unfortunately, we are getting back to exactly the non-tariff barriers that we have been working with China on for years.
Falkender says accusations by the Chinese regime that the U.S. has violated the terms of the Geneva Trade Agreement due to semiconductor exports are not grounded in reality.
We have long had issues with exporting semiconductors that would go into artificial intelligence. That has never been part of that was not part of the trade negotiations in Geneva.
Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration wants countries to give them their best offer on trade negotiations by Wednesday. It says a draft letter from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative suggests an urgency within the administration to complete deals before the July 9th 90-day time frame established in April. Officials have said that several agreements are nearing completion. Washington has been engaged in such talks with the European Union, Japan, Vietnam, and India, among others. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Trump administration is optimistic about a trade deal with India. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says negotiations between the two countries are progressing.
I think to be in a very, very good place, and you should expect a deal between the United States and India in the not too distant future, because I think we found a place that really works for both countries.
A U.S. trade delegation is scheduled to visit New Delhi on Thursday and Friday for further discussions. Lutnick said Washington is seeking lower tariffs, especially on agricultural products. The U.S. also seeks greater market access for U.S. firms and increased purchases of defense equipment. Washington is working to reduce the U.S. trade deficit with India. In return, Lutnick said the U.S. is prepared to expand access to Indian exports. And Taiwan is talking with the U.S. on tariffs, too. Taiwanese officials said Taiwan and the United States have continued to communicate closely on negotiations, but did not give more information at this point. We'll keep you updated, though. The Trump administration wants countries to provide their best offer on trade negotiations by Wednesday. Taiwan was hit with a 32% tariff before President Trump paused it for 90 days. Taiwan's government said in early May that it had concluded its first round of substantive tariff talks with the United States, describing the atmosphere as frank and cordial. More news on tariff negotiations. British Trade Minister Jonathan Reynolds is meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer in Paris today. The two will discuss how to implement a signed trade deal after Trump announced a 50% tariff on imported steel. Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump agreed to cut tariffs on British cars and steel, but a delay in implementing the agreement means tariffs may rise before they fall. Starmer's spokesperson said the deal would eliminate tariffs on most steel products exported to the United States, regardless of the 50% tariff announced by Trump. As lawmakers return to Capitol Hill to continue work on the big budget bill, President Trump is doubling down. This as several critics are surfacing in the Senate and as senators prepare to make changes to the bill. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has Trump's latest comments on this front.
Rejects projections that say that this big budget bill will add to the national deficit. In a post on Truth Social on Monday, he said so many false statements are being made about the one big beautiful bill, but what nobody understands is that it's the single biggest spending cut in history by far. But there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. One main issue here over this bill is the impact that Trump's tax cuts will have on the deficit. Trump says that his tax cuts will help grow the economy and that the growth is underestimated in critical reports such as the one that came out from the Congressional Budget Office. So on the surface, reports like this make it look like this bill will leave the country in a worse position economically, but Trump says that's not the case. And one main piece of pushback that we've heard from Republican critics over in the Senate is that it doesn't do enough to lower the deficit. And Trump directly responded to the most outspoken critic, Senator Rand Paul, writing on Truth Social this morning. Rand Paul has very little understanding of the bill, especially the tremendous growth that is coming. He loves to vote no on everything. He thinks it's good politics, but it's not. Now, this comes as the House is preparing to make more cuts to the federal government's budget in the near future. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking about the separate effort.
I think there may be multiple packages, rescissions packages coming, and we'll process them as quickly as we can. I mean, it's a big priority for me.
He's referring to certain guidance that the White House is sending Congress on certain cuts that DOJ has identified so far and that Congress will then need to approve. Now, this all comes as the Senate has returned and they're going to be working on making changes to the House's version of this big budget bill. But Speaker Johnson warns his Senate counterparts not to change the bill too much, otherwise he'll have a hard time getting it back through in the House. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt is now addressing the media. Let's tune into the press briefing.
Upon the visa expiration, he overstayed, filed an asylum claim, and was given a work authorization by the Biden administration. Instead of deporting this heinous individual, Joe Biden's administration allowed him to stay in our country and to work. President Trump sounded the alarm over these reckless Biden policies for years because this is the predictable result of letting anti-American radicals and illegal immigrants pour into our country. Immigration security is national security. And that's why the Trump administration, at the direction of our great president, has secured our border, strengthened our immigration system, and has taken immediate steps to protect the United States from foreign terrorists and other public safety threats. President Trump acted swiftly upon taking office to reform our visa issuance process to ensure that dangerous aliens who are intent on harming Americans or our national security interests are no longer admitted into our country. Under the Trump administration, aliens will only be admitted into the United States through the legal process and only if they do not bear hostile attitudes towards our citizens, our culture, our government, our institutions, or most importantly, our founding principles. Under President Trump, the United States has zero tolerance for foreign visitors who support terrorism. Violators of U.S. law, including international students, will continue to face visa denial or revocation and deportation. And illegal alien criminals will continue to be arrested and deported from our country. On that note, ICE and federal law enforcement partners just wrapped up a month-long surge operation arresting nearly 1,500 illegal aliens in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. During the enhanced operation, dubbed Operation Patriot, ICE Boston and other federal law enforcement personnel focused on transnational organized crime, gangs, and dangerous illegal alien offenders throughout Mass. More than half of the nearly 1,500 illegals arrested had significant criminal convictions or charges pending against them. Here are just some of the violent illegal aliens who were removed from communities in Massachusetts during Operation Patriot. A Salvadorian national with active Interpol red notice for aggravated homicide. A Guatemalan national and registered sex offender who had pending criminal charges in Boston for 5 counts of indecent assault and battery on a person 14 or over. A Honduran national who was last arrested for rape, indecent assault, and battery of a person 14 or over. A Colombian national charged with kidnapping, aggravated rape, and indecent assault and battery on a person 14 or over. And a Guatemalan national who was convicted of murder in Boston. Also, a Brazilian national who was charged with aggravated rape of a child by force and possession of child pornography. Again, these are people who are living in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And lastly, a Salvadorian national whose criminal history includes charges of aggravated rape of a child by force. I don't think anybody in this room wants these types of heinous criminals in your communities. And it's thanks to this administration that they are being removed from our country. When Democrat-run jurisdictions released violent illegal alien criminals back into communities after making arrests instead of turning them over to federal immigration enforcement like they should, those Democrats are putting law-abiding Americans at risk. And these insane policies force law enforcement officials to make much more difficult arrests that put their lives, our law enforcement lives, in jeopardy. President Trump is incredibly grateful for our heroic officers on the front lines getting these violent illegal alien invaders out of our communities. Law and order is back in America under President Trump. And on that same note, there are new crime statistics that show crime is plummeting. In fact, Politico summed it up like this. Murder rates are tumbling across the U.S. in 2025. Homicide stats are down at least 20% over last year. And we could be on course for the lowest number on record. With President Trump in charge, the days of criminals being put over victims are over. On the topic of immigration, the Washington Post just ran one of the most ridiculous headlines ever, even by their standards. And on my very first briefing several months ago, I said I would hold anyone accountable in this room. The Washington Post actually had this headline, "The Mysterious Drop in Fentanyl Seizures on the U.S.-Mexico Border." How is this mysterious? There is no mystery about why there is a decrease in fentanyl coming into the United States. This administration's strong border policies are the reason there has been a decrease in fentanyl trafficking. His strengthened relationship with Mexican President Sheinbaum and all of the measures he has been taking to deter illegal human and drug trafficking at our United States southern border is the reason for plummeting fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border. There is nothing mysterious about that, and we'd like to see the Washington Post update their headline accordingly. This is clearly trying to intentionally manipulate the minds of the Americans, and I think the American people understand why there's been a fentanyl drop. And our office responded to this inquiry. We provided a whole host of the reasons that fentanyl seizures at the southern border have dropped, and the Washington Post refused to run them, and that's despicable. In other news, positive economic reports continue to flood in. Inflation dropped to 2.1% in April. Personal income increased 0.8% in April. So inflation is down and wages are up. That's almost triple the expectations and against the doubts of nearly everyone in this room. And we also saw the largest monthly decline in the trade deficit on record as a result of President Trump's very powerful tariffs. Lastly, the price of eggs has dropped more than 61% since President Trump took office in January. I remember my very first briefing, I was asked about the cost of eggs. The reporter tried to insinuate it was this administration's fault, even though he had only been here for a few days or weeks. It was a result of the previous administration's terrible policies, and in record time, this president has fixed that problem that he inherited from Joe Biden, and now egg prices have dropped 61% since this president took office. There's a lot of good news, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so let's get to them. We have just the news in our new media seat today. Amanda Head, thank you for being with us. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure, thank you so much. There is a disturbing trend of anti-Semitism turning into terrorism. Of course, the Boulder, Colorado instance that you just mentioned, the 2 Israeli embassy staffers who were murdered, Pennsylvania governor's mansion with the Jewish governor inside getting set on fire. Does the president consider this domestic terrorism? And as such, are there official alerts to law enforcement, BOLOs, task forces, things like that?
The president has made it very clear, as he said in his statement yesterday, that yes, these anti-Semitic acts of violence do qualify as terrorism, and he does not want to see terrorism or violence of any form taking place in the United States of America. And as for specifically anti-Semitic terrorism and anti-Semitic acts of violence and those that are targeting Jewish Americans, this administration has done more to combat that violence than any administration in history. And one incident is one too many. And I think, frankly, that's something the previous administration was not willing to say. This president will stand up for Americans of all religions, of all faiths, of all creeds, and we will continue to look at policy measures and actions that we can take in addition to the actions that have already been taken to curb this anti-Semitic violence. And to Jewish Americans at home, across the country, this president has your back.
And then on another issue, back in February, Secretary Kennedy created a commission to re-examine the childhood vaccine schedule. But there are still states outstanding like California, Connecticut, Maine that are not allowing any religious exemptions for kids, not only to go to school, but to participate in sports and extracurricular activities. Would the president want to see religious exemptions allowed across all 50 states? And how do you enforce that, especially with states like California that are already defying the president on the men and women's sports issue?
Generally speaking, I know the president supports religious exemptions for families when it comes to vaccinations. As for the instances in those specific states, I'll have the administration and the White House look into it and see what executive action, if any, we can take on that front. Thank you. Kelly.
Good afternoon. We're now in hurricane season, and obviously there is great concern every year about the potential for that. Can you speak to how the president is planning to have the level of support, should it be needed, to be as it has been with a reduction in the workforce? And is he still comfortable with Administrator Richardson, who had talked, whether joking or not, about not being aware of a hurricane season for this country? What is the president's level of briefings on what may be required? If you could give us kind of an overall update on that.
Sure. Well, of course, we know that we are into hurricane season now, and I know FEMA is taking this seriously, contrary to some of the reporting we have seen based on jokes that were made and leaks from meetings. But Secretary Kristi Noem and the FEMA leadership are all over this. They are committed to ensuring that federal resources and tax dollars are there for Americans in need. And the president continues to review requests for emergency aid and carefully considering them. However, this president has made it clear we're not going to enable states to make bad decisions with federal tax dollars and then have the federal government later have to bail these states out. We want to see states be responsible with their tax dollars to do as much as they possibly can, and then the president will deeply and thoughtfully consider any requests for federal aid that come to his desk. And I think some of the media reporting we've seen on this is frankly sloppy and irresponsible. There are serious people who are taking this issue seriously, starting with the president himself, who, as you know, on his first domestic trip back in office, visited both North Carolina and California, both of which were, of course, hit by natural disasters when he wasn't even president, but he took ownership of that and visited those places and those people immediately.
Is it
Brian?
About hurricane season appropriate, though, now that this is serious business, as you talked about?
It's serious business, Kelly, and I'm not going to engage in such fodder with a question like that. Brian?
Thank you, Caroline. Reuters was reporting that there is a letter that is meant to be sent to other countries, which would give these countries a deadline of Wednesday to produce their best offer on the trade matter. Why does the administration feel the need to send this letter? And I have one more follow-up on trade.
Sure. I can confirm the merits and the content of the letter. USTR sent this letter to all of our trading partners just to give them a friendly reminder that the deadline is coming up. And they are in talks. Ambassador Greer, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick are in talks with many of our key trading partners around the globe. As you know, Brian, I know the Wall Street Journal has covered this quite heavily. And they continue to be engaged in those discussions. And this letter was simply to remind these countries that the deadline is approaching and the president expects good deals, and we are on track for that, I will emphasize.
On the trade side, though, when the deal with the United Kingdom, there was this idea of a reprieve on the auto tariffs. Is the president looking to do another similar deal on the sector-by-sector reduction in tariffs, or is this more going to be deals related to the reciprocal tariffs that were announced months ago?
Well, as I've said previously from the podium, and the president has discussed as well, each country has unique advantages, unique challenges to it based on their markets and what they export to us and what we export to them. And so that's why the president smartly advised his trade team to engage in tailor-made deal-making. And we saw that with the United Kingdom, and we will see that with other countries as well.
Kate. Does the president support the Senate moving forward with a bill imposing heavy sanctions on Russia?
Look, the president has spoken about his position on sanctions on Russia. He has smartly kept this as a tool in his toolbox if necessary. But I think the Senate and everyone on Capitol Hill respects the president is the commander-in-chief for a reason. And as you know, Russia and Ukraine engaged in direct talks yesterday. That was at the encouragement of this president when he spoke to both leaders of both countries via phone just a couple of weeks ago. And so I would just like to remind everybody how far we have come in just 4 months. I mean, it was inconceivable last year at this time for Russia and Ukraine to be engaged in direct talks. And it's because of the president's insistence and determination to get this war to an end that these countries sat down yesterday. So he's willing to use sanctions if he needs them, and the Senate and the Capitol Hill understand that the president is the commander-in-chief and he's leading United States foreign policy as he should.
And on Iran, the president said that the U.S. would not allow for any uranium enrichment, but the proposal offered to the Iranians reportedly allows for low levels of enrichment. Can you explain that discrepancy?
I'm not going to comment on alleged details of the report. We're not going to negotiate through the media out of respect for these ongoing discussions and negotiations that Special Envoy Witkoff is leading. The president made his position very clear on Truth Social last night. In fact, it couldn't be any more clear, and I would reiterate that's his position. Special Envoy Witkoff sent a very detailed and acceptable proposal to the Iranian regime that the president hopes they will accept, and if not, they will face grave consequences, as the president himself has reiterated. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline.
You're welcome.
A couple of things, if I may. Firstly, can you confirm whether or not President Trump is going to be going to the NATO summit in The Hague later this month?
I can confirm he will be going to the NATO summit, yes.
Great, thanks. And another question on the Netherlands, in fact. Just wondering if you have any reaction to the collapse of the Dutch government there after the anti-EU and anti-Islam leader Geert Wilders, who's been described as a Dutch Trump, pulled out of the government there.
I don't have a comment on that, but certainly we should and we will get you one, okay?
Thanks.
You're welcome. Brett.
Thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask, a couple days ago, the president announced that he was withdrawing the nomination of Jared Isaacman to lead NASA, citing a thorough review of prior associations. I wondered, why did this review happen just now, after the nominee was so far into the process? And can you explain the president's thinking on who he might choose?
Look, the president reserves the right to nominate individuals to key administration posts. He also reserves the right to remove those individuals if he chooses, just like he reserves the right to fire anybody in the executive branch that he wants. And so a new replacement for NASA will be announced very soon, as the president himself said.
Was there something in particular that came up that caused the president concern with this nomination?
The president wants to ensure that all of his nominees are aligned fully with the America First mission of this administration. And again, he will be announcing a replacement very soon. Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
It's been just about a month since President and Prime Minister Starmer announced...
I can't see you all the way back there. Phil's head is in the way. There you go.
So it's been just about a month since Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump announced that the U.S. and U.K. had reached a trade deal,
That's right.
or at least a framework for a deal. Now there are at least some conservative MPs in London who are complaining that Parliament has not yet seen the text of any deal. So I'd like to ask you from this side of the pond, is there a text for the deal ready to be released, submitted? And if not, when can we expect it? And then I have one more.
There's most definitely text with this deal. There is language that this side has seen. You'll have to ask the UK Parliament why they haven't seen it from their own government. I obviously can't answer that question.
And on Caroline, one more on Ukraine,
go ahead,
please.
Jonathan. Sure, go ahead.
On Ukraine, it's been a couple of days since Ukraine made that audacious drone strike on Russian airfields. The president hasn't said a word about it, and usually he's not shy about making his thoughts known on the war. Or, it's not bad on the war or any other subject. What have you heard from him on this audacious drone strike? Is he surprised? He said that Zelensky didn't have the cards when they met in the Oval Office a few months back. Does Zelensky possibly have some cards that the president hadn't known about?
Look, the president's thinking on the Russia-Ukraine war as it stands, I spoke to him about it just this morning, is he remains positive at the progress that we've seen. Again, he urged both leaders to sit down and talk directly with one another, and they did that. Russia handed over a memorandum of peace, or a peace plan, or a suggestion of one, I understand, to the Ukrainian side. They also agreed upon the exchange of prisoners or hostages from each other's countries. So he remains positive about the progress that we're seeing, but he also is a realist, and he realizes these are two countries that are at war and have been for a long time because of his predecessor's weakness and incompetence. So he's working hard to solve this conflict, and that's where his mind is right now on it. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. Same topic, just to put a finer point on it. Does President Trump approve of Ukraine's decision to strike nuclear-capable bombers in Russia?
I would like to let the president speak on that himself.
And just to follow up, has the president...
I would just add to that, the president does not want to see this war prolonged. He wants the fighting to stop, he wants people to stop dying, and he wants this to be solved at the negotiating table. The reason he is so deeply involved and has spent so much time and effort on this war is because he hates to see people dying. Again, these are not Americans that are being killed. These are Russians and these are Ukrainians. This is a war very far away. But this president truly cares about peace, and that's what he wants to see.
What is President Trump doing to ensure that a similar internal drone attack doesn't happen here in the US, given this was done at pretty low cost, very stealthily? You know, it obviously raises questions about our own security, particularly for US aircraft here.
It absolutely does, and that's why the president nominated Secretary Hegseth and has approved some of the changes that have been made at the Pentagon to ensure that we have the most lethal fighting force in the world, and that the United States military is the best, the biggest. That's why he wants the One Big Beautiful Bill to be passed, because it increases our defense spending. It's why he also launched the announcement of the Golden Dome to prevent from missile strikes and attacks in the future. And the president has a full understanding, I can tell you because I've spoken to him about it, about the future of warfare and how drones are a big part of that. And I will not get ahead of our policy team, but I think you can expect to see some executive action on that front in the very near future.
Caitlin. Two questions for you as well. On the Big Beautiful Bill, you said recently that it is, quote, blatantly wrong to say that it adds to the deficit. You essentially said that an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers you believe are wrong. But Republicans like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul disagree. They are saying that it will add to the deficit. That is their concern. Is the White House's position that those two Republican senators are, quote, blatantly wrong?
It is. Those senators, it's not news that they disagree with this president on policy, and the president has vocally called them out for it and for their not having their facts together. I would add the Congressional Budget Office has been historically wrong. In fact, they predicted the Trump tax cuts from the president's first term in 2017. Their prediction was wrong by $500 billion. Those tax cuts had nearly $500 billion more of revenue than the Congressional Budget Office scored. And I would also point out, I don't think many people know this, there hasn't been a single staffer in the entire Congressional Budget Office that has contributed to a Republican since the year 2000. But guess what? There have been many staffers within the Congressional Budget Office who have contributed to Democrat candidates and politicians every single cycle since. So unfortunately, this is an institution in our country that has become partisan and political, and we are very confident in our own economic analyses of this bill. There is $1.6 trillion in savings, and our Office of Management and Budget Director, Russ Vought, is a fiscal hawk. He is well known in this city for being a well-respected fiscal hawk. He has tools at his disposal to produce even more savings. And as you know, the White House will be sending our rescissions package to Capitol Hill today.
And on immigration, the other day that the Homeland Security Secretary said, and I'm quoting her now, that an illegal alien threatened to assassinate President Trump and highlighted his arrest. A man has now admitted to framing him, saying that he wrote the letter that the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem posted online. Last I checked before I came into the room, that post was still up from DHS. Does the White House expect them to issue a clarification or a correction on that front?
We can ask the Department of Homeland Security and get back to you. Jeff.
Caroline, is the United States putting pressure on China to release its hold on rare earths that are hurting car companies and technology companies now that require that for their for their products, and is that pressure working?
Well, I can assure you that the administration is actively monitoring China's compliance with the Geneva Trade Agreement. I know the United States, on our end, we have complied with the terms that we set, and our administration officials continue to be engaged in correspondence with their Chinese counterparts. And as you all know, and I know there's a lot of interest in it, there will be a leader-to-leader talk very soon. And when that happens, as always, we will let you know.
Also in Asia, just does the White House have a reaction to the results of the election in South Korea?
Yes, we do. In fact, let me find it here for you. It should be somewhere in here. Thank you. We do not, but I will get you one, Jeff. Go ahead.
Thanks, Kelly. 2 questions on trade. Is this letter that was sent to trading partners a sign that the president isn't satisfied with the pace of these negotiations? Is he trying to light a fire under these talks now?
Well, look, the president has been very direct to our trading partners in his conversations with them, with foreign leaders directly, that they need to cut deals with the United States of America. The tariff agenda of this president, he believes very strongly in it. And as you've all seen, he's unafraid to use tariffs to protect our industries and protect our workers. But he wants to see these tailor-made deals be signed. And I will tell you, of course, I never want to be the one negotiating with the press about these internal discussions and deliberations. But our team, who is deeply involved in this, sees these deals moving in the right direction. In fact, Ambassador Greer is in Paris right now meeting with many of our trading partners.
So we should still expect this flurry of deals in the next 36 days, and the plan is still for those full tariffs to go back into effect on July 9th.
The plan is for the announcement of these deals to be made very, very soon, yes. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
So Governor Whitmer confirmed that she spoke with President Trump about the possibility of pardoning the plotters against her, the kidnapping case. She didn't give us an idea of what the president's reaction was to that. Do you have any information about what he said?
Well, I won't reveal the president's private discussion unless he gives me liberty to, but I will reiterate what he said publicly when he was asked by one of the journalists in this room in the Oval Office a couple of weeks ago about the pardons. He said it's something he would look at, nothing more, nothing less. Haley, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline.
And then to Kelly next to you.
Thank you. When it comes to the leader-to-leader call with Xi Jinping this week, what is the president's expectation of this call? Is he looking for concrete outcomes out of this, or is he looking to kind of warm relations as these trade talks are ongoing?
Well, President Trump and President Xi have shared a respectful relationship throughout the years. And again, I won't get ahead of the president on that call, but as always, after, you'll hear directly from the president or from myself or someone else here at the White House. Kelly.
Caroline, thank you. I want to get back to the anti-Semitic behavior that's been going on college campuses, as well as recently in Boulder, Colorado. The president, as you know, has the White House Faith Office, the Religious Liberty Commission, as well as the Anti-Task Force on Anti-Christian Bias, which includes anti-Semitism. From a whole of government perspective, and the president has already mentioned how he hates these kinds of acts that have been going on, can these entities and these agencies work together with the president to put out a proactive campaign to help people stop the hate?
I think the president himself has been leading on this, Kelly, and has been incredibly clear in his rhetoric that he is not going to tolerate such hate or behavior in the United States of America. And you will see that rhetoric being followed up by action from the Department of Justice, who is seeking to prosecute these cases to the fullest extent of the law. And I know the Attorney General and the FBI Director were very quick to call this what it was, targeted terrorism. And there was some, I think, criticism from the media, and well, at least pundits I saw on television saying, are they too quick to jump here? No. They see the facts and they reveal those to the American people, and they're transparent. And I think, frankly, that's a breath of fresh air from what we experienced in the previous administration.
Are there programs that they can put in place to campaign against this kind of violence, to actually take the whole approach and say, we want to get ahead of you. If you're thinking it, don't do it. And if you're going to do it, sit down and talk to someone within the Faith Office, within the Religious Liberty Commission, as well as the task force.
Yeah, surely. It's a good idea, and I'll pass it along to them. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. When you look at these last-minute Biden pardons, the big ones, Biden siblings, Fauci, January 6th committee.
That's right.
Most of the big ones have the same very neat signature. We would expect that probably to be the auto pen. There is one that looks different. It looks authentic. In fact, if you look at the last name, it almost looks like the president was having a hard time spelling his last name there. Is this White House of the opinion that the only pardon that would count is one that the president signed himself?
It's very interesting. Very interesting props. If you want to bring them to my office later so I can take a closer look, I would like to do that. The president is making a good point when he discusses the usage of the auto pen. Who was running the country for the past 4 years? Perhaps those documents were signed with the auto pen, something that this, I believe the Department of Justice is looking into. As you saw, Ed Martin made an announcement at the Department of Justice this morning to launch an investigation because the American people deserve answers.
Is there any concern that this president, who won the election on a promise to fix the economy and close the border, that focusing and scrutinizing these Biden pardons is looking into the past instead of looking forward?
I think in comparison to the amount of time this president has spent on securing the border, on fixing our economy, I just read out for you an entire list of economic accomplishments. Look at the border numbers, look at the time and effort he's divulged into solving the global conflicts abroad. It pales in comparison, but it still, nevertheless, is a very important issue. And it was a huge issue that sent the president back to this White House. The Americans saw with their own eyes a mentally incompetent president, and they want answers for that. And the president believes they should have
And
them.
something that just crossed, Caroline, how mad do you think President Trump is going to be when he finds out that Elon Musk said, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it."
Look, the president already knows where Elon Musk stood on this bill. It doesn't change the president's opinion. This is one big, beautiful bill, and he's sticking to it. Tamara.
Thank you. The National Security Council was reorganized, or some staffing changes were made the Friday before Memorial Day. I'm hoping you can explain sort of the new structure, what the structure is of the National Security Council, what the goal is in terms of staffing levels. What is the new National Security Council mode?
Well, as with everything in this White House, it is a top-down approach. The president is here. He is president. He's not an auto pen like the previous president was. He's very much involved in literally every policy discussion and decision that takes place. And we felt it was best to reorganize the National Security Council to respond to that top-down approach that we have here in this White House, and to streamline the efficiency and the effectiveness of the National Security Council. And I would add that Secretary of State Rubio and now National Security Advisor Rubio is doing a tremendous job at leading the National Security Council. He knows the president. He understands where the president is on these issues. He's great to work with here at the White House. I can tell you that. I appreciate seeing him a lot more in the building. And he and the president and the entire National Security Council, who's made up of great patriots who love this country, are doing a tremendous job on the many conflicts around the world that this administration inherited.
Is there a goal staffing level?
I'm sorry?
Is there a goal for the staffing level, like the number of people who would be in this National Security Council?
We just want the National Security Council to be as efficient as possible, and if staffing needs are necessary, I'm sure Secretary Rubio would not mind hiring people if necessary, but again, we've been working with them day in and day out, and they're chugging along and doing great work. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions, if I can. President Trump got involved himself in presidential election in Poland by supporting a conservative candidate who ultimately won.
Yeah.
What does it mean for the future U.S.-Polish relations? What's likely to change?
Well, I believe the president is obviously pleased to see the result of the Polish elections. He met with Karol Nawrocki, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yes, Nawrocki. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your insight on that. He met with him at the White House, and he told them, you're going to win because you support common sense. And he supported strong borders in Poland. He supported an end to the woke, radical DEI stuff that we've seen not just here in the United States, but really take over Europe and, frankly, the whole world. He was very outspoken about that. And I was reading the reports about how the Polish people felt about this man, and they felt like he was putting the needs of Poland first. And that's a very refreshing feeling, one that we know very well here in the United States of America. So as you know, the United States and Poland have always had a very deep and strong relationship, friendship. They're a great ally, and I know the president continues to look forward to working with them.
We have one more on Ukrainian drone attack on Russia. Was President Trump informed in advance by Ukraine that the attack is coming?
He was not. Carrie.
Caroline, so I just want to go back to the issue on the anti-Christian bias as well as issues on anti-Semitic issues. Senator Grassley just put out a report saying that the FBI files have showed that the Catholic group targeting was way more prevalent within the FBI during the Biden era than was previously shown, as far as former FBI Director Christopher Wray was putting out there during congressional testimony. Can you discuss here what President Trump would like to see in terms of consequences within the FBI as far as those who were involved? Also, the second question, if the DOJ finds that the auto pen was used by President Biden, should those actions that were used with the auto pen, should they be null and void?
I'm not going to get ahead of the Department of Justice's investigation into the usage of the auto pen. And the question is not, was the auto pen used? It's whether or not the President of the United States knew it was being used, and if not, who was using it in his name, which is clearly illegal behavior. Deanna.
Thanks, Caroline. One on foreign policy, one domestic, if I can.
Sure.
On foreign, just speaking to the president's Truth Social post about Iran recently, saying that there will be no uranium enrichment. Is he saying that that's a red line for him or no?
I already answered this question. The president's been very clear about where he stands on that.
Okay, and then on domestic, there is a report that Laura Loomer met with the vice president today. Can you speak to her relationship with the administration and if she's informally advising in any way?
She is not. I do know she met with the vice president. As for what was discussed in that meeting, I would defer you to his team.
Thanks, Caroline. I have one question on anti-Semitism, one question on China. So for years, radical leftists and Islamists have been calling for so-called globalize the Intifada. Do you believe this is a call for violence against Jews? And do you think these attacks on Jews around our country is what globalizing the Intifada looks like?
I don't want to speak to the merits of those claims without looking into them, but as I said, any violence against Jewish Americans will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Absolutely. And also, Secretary of State Rubio made an announcement saying he'll be revoking visas of certain Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party. Does that include sons and daughters of politicians, presidents, and chairmen?
Again, Secretary of State Rubio has the right to revoke visas, and he made the announcement that the State Department will begin to aggressively revoke those visas of Chinese students who are in our country, namely those with Chinese Communist Party ties, or those who could be a threat to our national security and the interests of the United States. Should both of you, go ahead and then back to you.
Thank you. There are now reports that Israeli forces are firing on Palestinians trying to get aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Up to 20 people, according to the Red Cross, have arrived to the hospital that they've set up with gunshot wounds, have died from them. Is this administration aware of these? And I mean, what is being done to address this situation?
The administration is aware of those reports, and we are currently looking into the veracity of them because, unfortunately, unlike some in the media, we don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak. Unlike the BBC, who had multiple headlines, they wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident, and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything. Oh. Okay, so we're going to look into reports before we confirm them from this podium or before we take action, and I suggest that journalists who actually care about truth do the same to reduce the amount of misinformation that's going around the globe on this front. John.
About the change in the leadership of the organization, what does that mean going forward, and why so early on is this happening?
What organization?
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
Well, look, this was a creative idea that the president called for to get aid into the region. These people were desperate and starving, and the president didn't like seeing imagery of that, and he wanted to ensure that aid was brought in with the approval of Israel for understandable reasons. We will never forget the brutal attack on October 7th. And again, this is something that the previous administration was unwilling to put the time and effort into doing. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. I want to bring it back to the way you began your briefing, talking about the president's mass deportation program and his priorities. 40% of crop farm workers in the U.S. are undocumented, and that's according to the Agriculture Department. Do they have a carve-out in terms of the president's mass deportation program?
The president and the Trump administration have been very clear. If you are in the country illegally, you are subject to deportation.
Is there any concern that, given that large number, if that number is correct, 40% of crop farm workers being undocumented, that could impact the food supply here in America if those individuals that obviously help pick crops all across the country are deported en masse?
Again, this administration is focused on deporting individuals who are in our country illegally. It's something we have to do. We cannot allow the previous administration's invasion of our country of illegal immigrants to continue. We just can't have it. And this is a law and order president. As for our farmers and their concerns, they have a president who has their backs and listens to their concerns and hears them. But we also have a legal pathway to come to this country and work specifically for agricultural work. So there's a legal way to do it, and we encourage that legal pathway, and we're currently working on strengthening our legal immigration system for that reason. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. Just wanted to follow up on your statement last week regarding the Maha report. Sure. You said that there was, you said, I understand there were some formatting issues with the Maha report that are being addressed, and that report will be updated. We also understand that since that, there have been some citations that came about. There's citations of studies that either did not exist or did not back up the report's conclusions. So when you were referring to formatting errors, is that what you were talking about, or was it, could you just explain that?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. There were formatting errors, and those errors were updated by the proper policy components here at the White House, and a new report was issued. So exactly what I said took place. Sure, go ahead, Alec.
Yeah,
good to see you.
Good to see you. Congresswoman Mary Miller suggested that changing Pride Month to Family Month. I would personally like to see maybe a nuclear family month. Some people are saying, let's get a Veterans Month. Does the president have any plans on making a proclamation, or is it just going to be June this year?
Well, there are no plans for a proclamation for the month of June, but I can tell you this president is very proud to be a president for all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or creed.
Caroline.
Reagan, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline.
And then I'll go to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Colorado passed sanctuary protections for illegals 1 month before the terrorist attack this weekend. 2 questions. Why did the DHS remove the sanctuary cities list that he had published, which was ordered by the president? And then what is the administration going to do to further crack down on sanctuary jurisdictions to prevent attacks like what happened in Colorado?
Sure. The Department of Homeland Security will be issuing a new list of sanctuary cities, an accurate list of sanctuary cities. As for what we're doing to crack down, the president has signed various executive orders and has directed the Attorney General to prosecute federal, state and local officials who are not complying with federal immigration authorities and, most importantly, federal immigration law.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline.
Caroline.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
So, does the president take calls from foreign leaders on the tariffs on steel and aluminum? Does he still intend to double them tomorrow morning?
The president will be signing that executive order today, and steel and aluminum tariffs will be going to 50%, yes.
No way it's going to change, or it's going to be suspended?
He made that announcement in Pennsylvania, and he plans to deliver on that promise to Pennsylvanians.
And why is he hiking that?
And Ed, go ahead. I can answer that, but go ahead, Ed.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Caroline. So a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson today said that the U.S. imposed harmful measures like new chip controls and pledging to revoke Chinese student visas. So are the Chinese the victims in this trade back and forth?
Look, I don't think anyone is the victim. These are 2 strong countries, and as I said, the president has a good relationship with China's president and leader, and that discussion will take place later this week.
And what other authorities is the president looking at for tariffs should the decision in the appeals court not go his direction?
Well, right now, his tariffs remain in effect. We spoke at length in my briefing last week about that decision that came down from the International Trade Court, which has been put on pause because the president absolutely does have the authority to implement tariffs and to declare a national emergency for our crippling trade deficit. He could always have the power to use Section 202 or Section 301 as well to impose tariffs if he deems necessary, especially Section 202 tariffs, which are sectoral, as you know, to protect our critical supply chains here at home.
Thanks, Caroline.
You're welcome.
you've got U.S. business leaders begging for certainty. So why did the president suddenly decide to hike tariffs on steel and aluminum again?
You also have U.S. business leaders begging to meet with this president and begging to come to the White House to talk to him because they know that he is a negotiator in chief, that he's making good deals on behalf of the American worker and the steel worker, in particular when it comes to the steel and aluminum tariffs, which he discussed in his speech at length at Pennsylvania and the need for them. And I would just add, I was at that speech on Friday with the president, and there were 2,000 steel workers and their families in the room, many of them wearing their hard hats. I spoke to one backstage who said this is the greatest thing that has happened for that community in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 60 years, because this is a president who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk too, and he's delivering on his promises to bolster our steel and aluminum industries in this country and to protect those jobs. If not for this president, that steel plant in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania would have closed. Those jobs would have been lost, and the president saved that company, he saved those jobs, and he's saving that community, and that's the intention of the steel tariffs, which he will sign later this afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Friday for she, do we think?
Stay with us. We'll bring you more news right after this break.